Welcome back to Dreamland Encounters. Every episode, I share stories of mysterious experiences that might help you relax and drift off to sleep. Before we start, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. Fishing had become my escape from endless 12-hour shifts at the plant. That night, the lake offered sanctuary from my cramped apartment and restless mind. An old wooden boat, a simple Coleman lantern, and complete darkness surrounded me. The midnight air felt crisp and clean, cutting through the summer's lingering heat. Stars peppered the sky like scattered ash, perfectly reflected in the lake's glassy surface. The only sounds were my fishing line, the boat's occasional creaking, and distant frogs calling from the reeds. Everything was still, no wind, no movement. Something felt different from the start. The fish weren't behaving normally. My strike indicator twitched softly, almost delicately. Then strange ripples began forming around the boat, perfect concentric circles spreading outward, as if stones were being skipped, but no stones were visible. They moved silently, dying away without a sound. I tried to rationalize it. Insects. Normal lake phenomena. But then my digital watch jumped back 2 minutes. My phone suddenly showed no service, despite having a signal just an hour earlier. I tucked the phone away, a strange unease growing. Out in the lake center, something moved. At first, I thought it was a bird. A bright streak caught my eye, breaking the mirror-like stillness. The lake seemed to pause, holding its breath, waiting. Something was coming. Far out on the lake, something skimmed silently across the surface. It moved with such precision that I couldn't even make out what it was. Unlike anything I'd seen in decades of fishing, this thing glided like a marble across glass. No splash, no wake, just a narrow silver track gleaming under moonlight. Its movement was deliberate, fast, then slow, then crossing an old marker buoy. Then it changed. The reflection folded in a way that haunted me. For one brief moment, it was a perfect silver sphere. Small, bright. Then it flattened like a coin tossed across a table, bending light without touching the water. When the light bent, the stars behind it shifted slightly, as if someone had nudged the entire canvas. I knew this lake. I'd fished these waters my entire life. I'd seen logs floating, boat reflections, all manner of things, but never anything like this. Silent, precise, moving like a pebble rolling without contact. My hands, steady for years, suddenly trembled so badly I couldn't have used my camcorder. The sphere, if it was a sphere, circled about 50 yards away, moving in an odd pattern like someone drawing with a bent ruler. A hint of metallic sheen caught the moonlight, like polished chrome reflecting lunar glow. The soundless motion made the lake feel simultaneously enormous and paper-thin, then it vanished. Not with a dramatic exit or whoosh, but simply disappearing. 1 second a silver line marked the water, the next nothing remained. The surface read like a page with an erased line. Frogs resumed their chorus, as if nothing had interrupted them. I sat in my boat, rod in hand, muscles cramping, waiting for the water to reveal more. At dawn, before sunrise, I returned to the cabin boat ride, keeping my adrenaline flowing. The wooden boards creaked as I tied up. Abby, the dog, gave her customary irritated bark. Trying to tell Mary, the lake's owner, my neighbor, friend with a rough laugh and rougher coffee, proved challenging. Words caught in my throat, as if duct tape shut, but I managed to speak anyway, knowing what I'd witnessed defied explanation. The rod was out, and I was watching. She didn't believe me when I told her about the silver ball. Her practical nature made my worry seem ridiculous. "You old fools and your stories," she'd say, chewing the inside of her cheek like she was searching for an angle I might have missed. I didn't go out that afternoon, telling myself I'd been spooked by late nights and the brain's tendency to play tricks. But curiosity won't be silenced by logic. 2 nights later, I returned with a camcorder, thermometer, and my stubborn determination. Sitting in the same spot, I watched the lake's middle like someone listening for a distant sound. Odd things happened. My ears felt the pressure drop twice, as if we briefly entered an airplane. My watch seemed to slip time, nudged by something unseen. The rod felt slightly warm against my hand. Unexpected in the cool night, wood smoke drifted across the far shore, suggesting someone grilling far too late. The water hummed an unfamiliar tone. At 11:48, the camcorder's LED flashed a battery warning. I swapped batteries, then later discovered a 30-second gap in the footage. As if someone had erased a paragraph sentence. A week passed without incident. I shared less with Mary, her laugh shrinking the experience until it felt like mere imagination. Round this time, a black sedan started appearing at the road's edge near the trees. Always presented dawn, always gone by noon. When I photographed it, The image came out grainy, like seen through a filter. Then, at 2:30 a.m., it happened again. The sphere emerged from the inlet, skimming closer than before. As it passed near the dock, the water around the pilings flashed brilliantly, like someone had triggered an impossible light, poured mercury in the air. Where the thing had been, I reached out and felt a coldness that seemed unnatural. Abby, my dog, remained asleep on the porch, not even stirring, as I moved across the boards. The next morning, I burned the bacon and headed into town with 2 beers. At the hardware store, a regular nodded along as I spoke. When I mentioned strange things, he would nod and share stories about wind tunnels and oil slick reflections. The sheriff's response was a smile and a casual question about the old sedan. I described the light and my missing footage, careful not to sound too far-fetched. His parting words stuck with me. "You keep telling yourself you're safe. Maybe that's all you need right now." He handed me a coffee, and I left empty-handed. 3 days later, they arrived. I spotted them before hearing the truck. 2 men in pristine black suits sat on my porch swing when I returned late from work. The porch light was off, but they sat with an eerie stillness, like perfectly carved wooden figures. One had a thin face with a precise nose that suggested carefully measured words. The other, with a wide jaw, sat slightly back, his shoulders set. Neither young nor old, they seemed cut from the same grey cloth. My first instinct was to back up and drive away. The second was to act normal, denying them the satisfaction of seeing me scared. That resolve lasted 6 steps. Walking to the porch, my boots echoing with a hollow sound, I approached. "Evening," the thin-faced man said, his voice flat and polite. "Mr. Cole," I responded, my own voice betraying a composure worn thin. "Can I help you?" The wide-jawed man asked if they could sit, assuring me they meant no bother. Their speech was deliberate, without rush or small talk, as if following a predetermined script. I wanted to demand they leave, to ask how they found my address, to tell them about the silver thing and the missing tape. But something held me back. 2 men sat at the other end of the swing, watching me with a precise clinical gaze, like a thermometer tracking a patient's temperature. Their shoes were pristine, plain leather without a single salt stain or grass mark. The thin-faced man's hands were neatly folded across his knee. "You fish at night a lot," he said finally. "I do," I replied. The wide-jawed man spoke as if delivering a small kindness. "Stick to daytime." I wasn't sure how to respond. "What expression do you make when a stranger tells you how to fish?" They smiled, those careful, measured smiles people use when choosing words deliberately. "There are elements that are more active at night," the thin man explained. "It's safer to be out in daylight." My response felt awkward, disconnected. I wanted to ask about their purpose, their agency, why they were speaking to me like a neighbor offering casual advice. Then the thin man produced a small silver card, sliding it across to me. I examined it like someone peering through a distant window. An unfamiliar emblem. A reference code. Neat numbers that revealed nothing. "Who are you?" I finally asked. "Researchers," the wide man said. "Field sampling." He leaned forward, attempting to sound reassuring. "Public safety." The words carried weight. They were careful, presenting themselves as approachable, documentable, not threats, just instructions. "If there's something out there bothering you, tell us," the thin man said. "We can help document it. There's no need to be in harm's way." I mentioned a silver thing on the water. The sentence hung incomplete, like a rope suddenly torn. "It doesn't make sound?" They nodded. The kind of men who take mental notes without writing anything down. When the wide man's hand moved toward his pocket, I flinched reflexively. He produced a pamphlet instead. A plain paper, nocturnal safety advisory. Avoid nighttime activities near water. Someone had printed this for a reason. Someone who preferred keeping things quiet. "You sure you'll be all right?" the thin man asked, phrasing it casually, like a neighbor inquiring about a broken fence, offering community service. I checked my camcorder, tape and watch after they left, scanning the shelf where I keep tackle. The missing block on the tape hadn't returned. My spare reel of lying, once full, now appeared slightly unwound, as if someone had examined the filament and carefully rewound it. They had come asking questions that seemed mundane, about my boat, my routine, my bait. They inquired about Abby and whether I kept a light on the dock. The thin man claimed they were with a regional unit, ready to provide contact information through official channels if requested. They took notes on a small pad, writing without seeming burdened by the task. For 20 minutes, they stayed, their presence making me want to respond with precise log-like details. Dates, times, numbers. When they departed, they stood at the edge of the gravel lane, watching the tree line until I could no longer see them. Days passed and the black sedan stopped appearing on the road. The hardware store man began smiling at me again. Mary's attitude shifted, offering coffee more frequently, as if testing a new approach to kindness. I ventured out during daylight hours. The lake settled, its ripples fewer, pressure drops less frequent, everything seemed normal. I told myself I was done with night water expeditions. I convinced myself I'd been lucky, that the men had helped somehow. A person could be careful and be fine. I kept their card in my wallet, not to call, but like holding on to a doctor's contact you hope never to need. The camcorder remained in the top drawer for months. Occasionally, I'd play the footage, watching until the missing frames made me feel like someone was editing my life. Long after their visit from the porch, I caught a fleeting glint on the water, a coin-like sliver that momentarily reminded me of that night. The dog stared at the far shore, then returned to sleep. I laughed quietly, remembering the wide man's advice about sticking to daylight. I never saw the silver thing again. I never received a call. The water changed things that night. Looking back, it was just another story about men who showed up unexpectedly, left quietly, and altered everything without saying much. Some days pass with ordinary rhythms. A fence needs fixing. A generator refuses to start. A neighbor's kid arrives with a rescued raccoon. These small moments fill the gaps between strange encounters. The men in black became a tale you'd share to sound worldly, but their visit lingered differently for me. Sometimes when I'm out on the lake at midday, rod hanging loosely, watching the horizon, I replay those moments. Was it a trick of light, an animal's graceful movement, or something else entirely? The way they slid the card across felt like both warning and kindness, like a neighbor advising you to wear a jacket. I do what they suggested. Daytime becomes my fishing time, with the lake loud with dragonflies and vibrant life. Nights belong to owls and singing coyotes. Still, some nights I wake at 2 a.m., listening, half expecting something to disturb the silence. I stand by the window, watching darkness and the line of birches blocking the view. Lights on, I feel safer. The card remains in my wallet, not from trust, but as a reminder of careful instructions. Our hiking trip started simply enough. 3 of us, me, Jenna, and Mark, left the trailhead at 4:30 p.m. A quick overnight to the ridge above Coldwater Hollow, expecting calm weather and a clear night. The valley's thin fog would melt by mid-morning. I knew the route from years back, before late bakery shifts and aging knees. We wanted the valley's dusk view and nighttime Milky Way. Nothing complicated. My small DSLR came along, my attempt at looking photographic. Jenna had her phone's camera, and Mark carried his never-dying headlamp. The switchback smelled of crushed pine and dust. We laughed, climbed, unaware of what awaited us. The valley stretched out beneath us, a soft landscape hushed by early evening. Fog blanketed the hollow like pressed fabric, the light shifting between gold sun and silver moonlight. We'd reached our campsite on a flat rock, setting up the small stove while the sky bled its final colors. Something felt different, not silence exactly, but a strange muting of sound. Birds still chirped late in the season, but the usual river hum and cricket chatter seemed dampened, as if someone had turned down the bass on nature's soundtrack. Jenna noticed it too. "Do you hear that?" she said. "The kind of comment people make when they want to confirm they're not imagining something." We ate and watched the sun's last smear across an eastern boulder. No headlamps yet. I always loved letting my eyes adjust to the natural darkness. Mark shared stories about his cousin's raccoon encounters, our laughter mixing with the valley's soft background wash. Around 9, as the final sunset strip faded, the fog began developing strange light points. At first, we thought they might be hikers' lights moving between cars and cabins, but these were too steady, little nodes rising and lowering like breath, splitting and rejoining like schools of fish. Jenna zoomed in with her phone. Tiny white pinpricks moved slowly beneath the fog. They weren't on any road. We watched, transfixed by something beautifully odd. The lights moved in perfect small arcs, like someone drawing with a compass. No sound accompanied them, the fog swallowing any potential noise. Sometimes the lights would slow, almost hovering. When they did, darker patches would pass beneath them, as if the light was cutting through the air itself. Mark clicked his headlamp low, then off. Maybe some hunter with a drone, he suggested, but none of us believed that explanation. We were adults, trying to rationalize the strange sounds or lack thereof. The night was eerily quiet. No drone buzz, no mechanical hum, just silence and small lights moving like delicate glass shells. I set up my DSLR on a small tripod, framing a long exposure shot over the valley. Long shots can capture amazing details, satellite streaks, plane paths, smeared headlight lines. I wanted to create a photograph that showed a river of light cutting through the fog. As the camera clicked and the screen glowed softly, we watched the lights move. Weird little moments started happening. My cheap digital watch blinked the wrong time briefly. Jenna's compass app spun wildly before settling. Mark's headlamp flickered between dim orange and bright white, as if someone was playing with a light switch. We joked nervously about battery problems. Then someone mentioned electrostatic and we laughed a bit too loudly. The lights began to braid together, moving more deliberately. One light skimmed low over the fog and sank differently than a lantern would. A perfect 6-foot ring pressed into the fog, creating a bubble of emptiness that drifted silently. When I tried to photograph the ring, the camera's live view glitched momentarily. The preview looked normal, but the ring was gone. Jenna's phone recorded a short clip that her app declared corrupt. We exchanged knowing glances. The woods have a way of challenging perception. Curiosity drove us down the ridge. The descent was all loose gravel and racing heartbeats, with fog rising like a thick curtain. The lights moved with increasing purpose, sliding behind trees and darting across the field in sharp, deliberate lines. Then we saw something that stopped us cold. In the shallow spaces where the lights passed, the fog formed columnar shapes resembling smoke, but not from any fire we knew. The fog gathered in columns, always paired like two legs, not full figures, not even silhouettes, but the way the mist condensed suggested limbs. Jenna broke the silence, her voice hushed as if the valley might overhear. "Do you think anyone's down there? People?" We crept lower, reaching the tree line and scanning the meadow. No hikers, no truck lights. Instead, lights moved along the far end of the hollow, tracing lines and knots, like someone practicing with a rope. Their movement was deliberate, unhurried. An airplane would streak across and vanish in seconds. But these lights meandered with patience. Two of the brightest lights rose, hovering just above the ground, then sliding together. The fog between them rippled, its edge momentarily gleaming with an almost metallic sheen that caught moonlight differently. My skin tingled. I set up the tripod and took a photo, the shutter clicking softly. But when I checked the image, only star trails appeared. What we saw with our eyes became thinner in the photograph. Something shifted around us. We weren't hunted, but observed. Like sensing someone standing just behind you from a subtle change in the air. Small signs accumulated. A deer waiting, then walking away purposefully. A distant farm dog howling, marking time. A woodpecker stopping mid-beat, never resuming. The stars hung cold and bright. We hiked back in single file, heads down. The valley lights moved in their own rhythm, unconcerned with our pace. At camp, I packed my camera, hands tired. We drank tea and debated staying the night. Mark was eager, Jenna hesitant, and I wavered between. As we often do in mountains, we took turns keeping watch. Someone lighter, someone listening. I lay awake, feeling the valley's lingering presence, that clinging tiredness that sneaks up like someone piling blankets. The night was quiet, broken only by small sounds, the valley's breath, a twig shifting, beetles scurrying. My mind wandered, tracing invisible patterns. Around 2 a.m., with eyelids feeling thin and fragile, Jenna touched my shoulder. She pointed down into the hollow where lights were weaving with an unsettling deliberateness. A perfectly straight line cut through the fog, terminating at a single tree. One light paused at the tree's base, hovering, almost motionless. Then something shifted. Not a sound, but an absence of sound. A pressure change swept through the air. Crickets fell silent. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jenna's laugh was soft, the kind that keeps you from losing your mind. "That's not normal," she whispered. We packed up methodically, not with panic, but with the calm of people wanting to distance themselves from something inexplicably strange. At the trailhead, a metal sign with regulations stood sentinel. Gravel crunched under my boots, and the night smelled of cold iron. Halfway down the main road, a black sedan, gleaming as if just detailed, pulled up and stopped. Two men emerged, their movements precise and measured. One tall and thin with a sharp nose, the other shorter and broader. Both wore sunglasses despite the moonlight. They approached with hands held forward, a practiced gesture. The thin man's smile never reached his eyes. "Evening," he said. "Any good photos?" The question hung in the air like a neutral object. I froze. Jenna went pale. Mark mumbled about lights. The men's expressions remained unchanged. "Records," the tall one said casually, but the word carried weight. The shorter man held a small card, waiting. He slid something across my hand, an object with an emblem and a few letters I didn't recognize. "Not offering, just placing. If you have images," he said, "we can archive them for further study." My mind drifted to corrupt files, missing frames, the ring absent from my tripod shot. My mouth felt dry. I said, "We took some stuff. Some didn't save some." I held up my phone like a thin shield. "Do you want to see?" They responded with a patience that suggested this was routine. We sat on a metal bench by the lot, and I handed over Jenna's phone since hers had the better clip. The men examined it methodically, like checking a form, not peering, just glancing. A tap, a silent nod. Questions followed. The time we'd been on the ridge, how long we'd watched the lights, whether we'd seen anything else. They wrote notes on a small pad. Their inquiries were calm. Had we ever been in a local hiking group? Contributed photos to regional nature archives? "Calibration," the tall one said, as if that explained everything. More important than the lights were how we lined up cameras. I recalled the compass app spinning, my cheap watch blinking incorrectly. The tall one's pencil moved across the page. They identified themselves as part of a regional observation unit documenting anomalies. Their advice was soft but firm. Stick to well-traveled trails, avoid the valley after dark. Not a command, just a suggestion wrapped in public safety. The shorter man added casually, "Stick to daytime hikes for a bit. It helps avoid trouble." Suddenly, my planned Twilight Ridge route felt like a potential violation. What was once just observation and questioning had shifted. Their politeness was precise. They were professionals who left no clear avenue for complaint. A small card, a phone number that rang to a receptionist who confirmed a unit's existence, but nothing more. They drove away without drama, leaving behind a sense of subtle restriction. Black paint melting into darkness. That week felt strange in ways hard to explain. Camera shots came back weird. Perfect star trails with sudden blank segments, like someone had cut pieces from the film. Jenna's phone kept glitching on video files. Mark noticed a black sedan parked nearby 3 mornings in a row, its occupants hidden in low-pulled hoodies. We shared these experiences with friends and colleagues, getting mixed reactions. Some listened sympathetically, others laughed, many suggesting we'd spent too much time in mountain air. Life continued its rhythm. I went back to baking, timing loaves to rise just as the shop opened. Jenna returned to her graduate seminars. Mark talked about rivers and driftwood. Night hikes became a thing of the past. Occasionally I'd consider reaching out, wanting to know their names, their agency, hoping for a business card with a traceable number. But something about their visit suggested a strange politeness. Asking too many questions felt almost impolite, disrupting the strange civility they'd extended. Months later, a local outdoor forum thread caught my attention. Another person had documented similar light phenomena. Their photos mirrored our experience, long exposure streaks with intermittent blanks. Comments ranged from technical analysis to casual jokes. Some users mentioned the regional observation unit, requesting their files. A few reported that their images appeared normal, until after this request, when small gaps suddenly emerged. People offered explanations: satellite interference, cosmic rays, faulty electronics. Yet these theories felt like hastily sewn patches, never quite covering the entire mystery. I still visit the ridge during daylight. Sunrise transforms the valley. Fog burning away as if nothing unusual had ever occurred. Wild flowers dot the meadow. Deer move through the graze. A woodpecker's rhythmic hammering breaks the silence. My camera stays packed. Long exposures left to others. Night brings familiar routines. Windows cracked open. Phone checked before sleep. Habits of someone seeking reassurance. Sometimes I catch myself scanning the trail toward the hollow, half expecting 2 black-clad figures to materialize on a porch swing, subtly reminding us of unspoken boundaries. No answers emerge. Only memories remain. The shape of strange lights, fog bending like an invisible hand, and that casual, unsettling question hanging in the air. The trail behind the old Thompson property in northern Vermont was quiet that Thursday evening. I was trudging along the ridge, my rifle slung over my shoulder, and my pack tightened up. The one with extra lenses and my old Canon for wildlife shots. Normally, I wouldn't carry camera gear during a hunt, but something felt different this time. A wet fog rolled off the nearby river, clinging to the pines like static. The forest had been silent for hours. No birds, no rustle of squirrels, just the occasional snap of a branch underfoot. The stillness was more than the usual pre-dusk quiet. It felt like the woods were holding their breath. Following a deer trail, I descended toward a small clearing I knew well. The path opened to a low valley where grass typically stood tall and green, often frosted this time of year. But when I stepped into the clearing, something stopped me cold. The grass wasn't just flattened, it was burned. Precisely, almost as if someone had ironed it into perfect concentric rings. 3 rings, each about 6 feet wide, leading to a center patch scorched down to bare dirt. A faint metallic smell hung in the air. Slowly, I pulled out my camera to document the scene. The mist softened the tree edges, making the clearing look otherworldly. Crouching at the outer ring to frame a shot, I noticed movement at the opposite tree line. 2 men emerged. Nothing remarkable about their appearance. Plain black suits, ties and shoes. But their movement was unnatural, almost gliding. They approached with a neutral exchange hanging in the air, as if their presence could maintain some kind of order. Later, men at the trailhead with white cards would ask about images, like librarians seeking documentation. We went home. The hollow remained. The lights kept their own time. The moon above, the valley below, cutting their arcs through the night. When I first saw them, something felt off. Their movements were too controlled, their appearance too perfect. No wrinkles in their suits, no stray hairs, just an eerie sense of uniformity. One spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. Evening. The clearing was quiet except for their words. You shouldn't be here. This is private property. My camera hung suspended between us. I stammered about hunting, trying to explain, but they didn't react like normal people. No smile, no warmth, just blank stares that felt more mechanical than human. I nodded and agreed to leave, but then they mentioned my camera. Something in their tone made my spine tingle. I hadn't even noticed how close they'd gotten until they were right there, surrounded by a thickening fog that seemed to muffle every sound. They asked about export controls. My nervous laugh felt weak and unconvincing. It's just a camera, I said, but they kept approaching, moving in perfect synchronization. The mist swirled around their feet like ghostly tendrils. Panic rising, I started backing toward the tree line. They didn't follow, just watched. Then, suddenly, they vanished, melting into the fog between the trees without a sound. I ran. My truck was a welcome sight down by the river access, keys trembling in my shaking hands. Looking back, the ridge was empty. The clearing had disappeared, swallowed by the forest as if it never existed. That week was surreal. Sleep became difficult. My camera felt haunted, each glance bringing a chill of unexplained dread. Then on Tuesday at the electronics shop I manage in Stowe, 2 men in black appeared. Same suits, same blank expressions, same deliberate movements, and I knew. I sat at the coffee shop, my cup suspended midair, when 2 men approached. They didn't look like typical customers. The taller one asked if I had a moment. I led them to the side office, my movements automatic. Export controls, the shorter one said, his gaze drifting to my camera repair corner. My throat went dry. They were deadly serious about something involving my drone. Did your drone record anything unusual? The question hung heavy in the air. I wanted to dismiss them as crazy, but something in their demeanor told me this was no joke. I admitted I'd flown the drone near the ridge a few days ago. Just a hobby drone, nothing special. They nodded, almost as if they'd anticipated my exact response. Delete all footage. Tonight, immediately. Their tone was calm but absolute. No room for negotiation. I stammered about the SD card being at home, but they were clear. I would delete everything, and I would never speak of this to anyone. Then they were gone. No farewell, no softening of their stark message. At home, I stared at the SD card, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. Eventually, I transferred the files to my laptop. I hesitated before opening them, afraid of what I might see. The initial footage was ordinary. Treetops, a winding river, fog drifting like smoke. Then something changed. A dark, motionless shape hovered above the ridge. No rotors, no sound. Wind whipped around, bending trees, but this object remained perfectly still. Zooming in, I saw a geometric, metallic form without clear edges. Suddenly, 2 figures appeared in the clearing, black suits, black hair, expressions blank and lifeless. They stood watching, unmoving. The shadow above them shifted imperceptibly. The figures turned and vanished into the trees as quickly as they'd appeared. I closed the laptop, surrounded by silence, my world suddenly feeling much larger and more mysterious. The memory haunts me still. Those rings in the grass, the cold fog that seemed to consume everything. I keep the footage, though I can't explain what I recorded or who those men were. Back roads at dusk sometimes trigger a chill. A dark shape hovering motionless beyond the trees, watching. I tell myself it's imagination. That Thursday afternoon in Ashland was grey, and wind swept the sky like steel wool. I'd been flying my drone near the river bend, capturing slow pans of treetops for a side project. After years of drone work, I knew how to handle tricky winds. While hovering above the tree line, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was a crow, but its movement, or lack thereof, was bizarre. This dark shape sat perfectly still despite fierce gusts that jostled nearby branches. My drone struggled to maintain position, yet this object remained completely motionless. A faint metallic shimmer outlined its edges, almost blending with the overcast clouds. I maneuvered the drone, trying to get a better view. The object caught the last sunlight, glinting dully silver. Then it tilted, or perhaps I did. No sound, no movement, no trace in the surrounding trees where something might have fallen. I checked the drone feed, attempted to zoom, but my controller beeped with a low battery warning. I guided it back, landed it, and walked closer to the clearing's edge. Nothing remained. Late at night, a metallic tang lingers in the air. Those precise grass circles suggest something beyond human explanation. Some experiences defy description, so I've told no one. Some things you simply don't discuss. My hands trembled slightly as I held the drone controller, scanning the tree line. Earlier that week, something strange had happened at the small electronics shop where I fix and sell drones and cameras. Two men in dark suits had walked in, their pressed clothes and polished shoes radiating an air of importance. They approached the counter where I was testing a drone battery, their eyes constantly scanning the room. "Export controls," one of them said abruptly. He gestured broadly at the display of drones. "Does this drone have export controls?" The other man stood silently, arms crossed, watching me intently. I stammered a response, my voice tighter than I intended. "It's just a consumer drone, nothing special." They exchanged an unreadable glance. The first man pulled out a small notebook, wrote something down, tore the page, and handed it to me. "Check the serial numbers. Report any irregularities." When I asked who they were, they simply nodded and left, walking out like they owned the street. I couldn't shake the memory of their visit, or the hovering shape I'd seen in the trees days earlier. That evening, I returned to the clearing, drone in hand. The wind had picked up, and I was determined to find a rational explanation for what I'd seen. As I slowly panned the camera across the tree line, scanning for any unusual movement, I suddenly realized something was definitely not right. The trees were still, no footprints, no disturbance in the branches, nothing at all. My stomach tightened. Something was watching me. I didn't notice it at first. The gusts made my drone struggle like crazy as I flew over the trees. Then something caught my eye, a slight bend in the light across the canopy. The dark form snapped into focus, hovering maybe 50 feet above the tree line, perfectly still. I moved closer, staying low behind a small ridge. No sounds broke the silence. No engines, no hum, nothing. Just the wind in the trees and that impossible stillness above. For 10 minutes, I watched. On my controller screen, I zoomed in. No wings, no obvious propellers. Just a matte dark form. The reflection drew my attention again. Not light off metal, but something stranger, like a mirror reflecting grey clouds in a way that made no sense, as if it was blending with the sky itself. A panicked thought struck me. If it notices me, does it care? Why does it feel like it does? My skin went cold. I almost dropped the controller and brought the drone back down, packing it away quickly. I didn't want to see it anymore. The next day, black-suited men arrived with the same intense presence. No introductions. "Serial numbers," the first one said, holding out a notebook. I couldn't hold back. "Look, I don't know what you want. I was just flying in the woods. Nothing classified, nothing secret." He stared at me, then wrote something down and handed me a torn piece of paper. "Make sure you keep your footage." I blinked. "Keep my footage. Safe. Copy always." Then they left. No threats, no explanations. At home, I reviewed the footage on my laptop. Most looked normal. Trees swaying, clouds rolling. But in a few tiny, almost imperceptible frames, the shape appeared. A dark blot above the trees, reflecting light in impossible ways, moving fractionally, almost aware of the camera. Each time I paused, it seemed to shift, not tied to any single frame. I've returned to that clearing several times since. The wind, trees, and river remain normal. I haven't seen the shape again, but I keep thinking about those men in black, how they knew about my drone, how they cared about my footage. Now I'm careful. I double-check batteries, SD cards, everything. And sometimes late at night I wonder. Every night I still examine that footage meticulously. Something lingers in the reflection of those trees against the grey sky, a dark shape that seems to hover just beyond reality. I can't explain who they were or what exactly happened, but I know whatever I captured was significant enough for someone to visit me twice, ensuring I kept the recording. The reason remains a complete mystery. It was a late-night drive on Route 97 north of Lake Chilon. The sky stretched clear and bright, moonlight illuminating an almost empty road. My car's engine seemed to echo louder than usual in the crisp, silent air. Just past the turn-off for a small resort town, a drowsy focus settled over me. Then I saw the lake. Normally, it was just another unremarkable body of water. But that night, something caught my attention. A single circular light rose from the surface, not like a splash or boat, but something entirely different. It hovered momentarily before shooting upward with impossible speed, faster than any aircraft I'd ever witnessed. My reflexes kicked in. I slammed the brakes, the car fishtailing slightly as I gripped the steering wheel. My heart thundered so loudly it seemed to drown out the engine and wind. The light ascended perhaps 200 feet, completely silent, leaving no ripples behind, just a smooth vertical streak that suddenly blinked out of existence. I'd heard the local stories before, whispers about strange lights, unexplained disappearances. But this was different. This was something I couldn't rationalize. By the time I reached the gas station, I was still attempting to convince myself it was a reflection or some ordinary phenomenon. That's when I noticed them. Two men at the adjacent pump, dressed in identical black suits that looked strangely rigid. They seemed lifted from an old espionage film, one with hands in his pockets, the other staring directly at me as I walked past. Didn't think much of it at first. Weird people show up at gas stations late all the time. At the moment that guy spoke, something felt off. Did you see it? His voice was mechanical, devoid of emotion. My heart started racing. What? I asked. The reflection, he said, from the lake. I froze. The other man waited silently, watching. Through the station windows, the lake looked calm and dark as ever. Yeah, I saw something. I'm not sure what. They nodded slowly. Careful what you say. Not everyone understands. The first man, I felt stupid. Quickly filling my tank, I tried not to stare at these two grown men in black suits standing by the pumps in the middle of the night, asking about a glowing light over the lake. When I turned back, they were gone. The pumps were empty. I checked the mirrors. Nothing. No sign of how they left. No car. It was like they'd vanished into the night. Driving away, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror. For a mile or two, something black seemed to move in the shadows near the tree line. But each time I looked directly, it disappeared. I told myself I was imagining things, that my adrenaline was playing tricks. At work the next day, I tried to forget. I didn't mention it to anyone, not even Mike. Some part of me didn't want to sound crazy, yet every time I thought about the glowing object or those men, a strange pressure lingered in the air. A week later, I asked my brother Alex if he'd seen anything weird over the lake. He shook his head, then paused. I saw a light a few nights ago, he said. Went straight up, didn't make a sound. Thought it was fireworks. We exchanged an uneasy look. A month passed. Nothing happened. I started believing I'd imagined the whole thing. Then one night, driving that same stretch of Route 97, the lake dark and calm, I swear I saw something. I gripped the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, refusing to look back after seeing that faint glow moving slowly under the water before it vanished. A few miles down the road, I stopped at a gas station, desperate to calm myself. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like living things, and I couldn't stop scanning the windows. Two men in black stood by the pumps. They weren't waving or smiling, just waiting. Something compelled me forward, despite my heavy legs and tight chest, as if the ground itself resisted my movement. The man who had been silent the night I first saw the glowing object spoke first. Did you see it tonight? He asked. Yes, I replied, my voice cracking. Something in the... He nodded. The other man spoke curtly. Keep it to yourself. No, please. No extra words. Just a calm warning that didn't feel like a threat. I nodded back, my hands shaking so badly I dropped coins while fumbling with my wallet. They waited silently, then vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. No car, no footprints, nothing. Over the next few months, I drove past the lake at night, always watching. Sometimes I caught a flicker, a faint reflection, a hint of movement. Other times, nothing. I half expected to see them in their black suits, waiting, but they never returned to the gas stations. The memory lingers like a shadow I can't shake. Were they just people? Something else entirely? I tell myself it was a trick of light, an overactive imagination, maybe a drone prank. But the quiet pressure I felt that night, their knowing gaze, the way they seemed aware I'd seen something, that feeling never truly disappears. Sometimes, driving past the lake after dark, I'm certain someone watches from the shadows, waiting. The evening sky hung heavy with summer heat as Marcus, Leah, and I walked home along the dirt road skirting Eagle Ridge. Dark blue mountains stretched across the horizon like distant shadows. We were laughing about nothing when Elah suddenly pointed upward. At first I thought it was a small plane, maybe on a training run. But this was different. The object moved impossibly, zipping between mountain ridges, darting behind peaks, then shooting straight up into the sky and vanishing in an instant. "Holy, did you see that?" Marcus whispered. We stood frozen. The sky was still bright enough to see everything clearly. The road curling around mountain bases, trees outlined against the landscape. No sound broke the silence. No motor, no jet engine, just emptiness. The walk home was strange. We tried acting normal, but we were all shaken. I kept trying to rationalize what I'd seen, telling myself it was just a drone or some unusual aircraft. But deep down, I knew something was different. School the next day brought more weirdness. In the guidance counselor's office, two bald men in black suits sat quietly. They weren't staff I recognized. Mrs. Ineva. Halbrook was nowhere to be seen. The men called students, in one by one. Sitting with other kids, I watched each return looking stunned. Their responses were strange, vague, disconnected. "Yeah, just answer questions." Okay. The atmosphere felt electric with tension. When my turn came, one man gestured me to sit. "Have you noticed anything unusual recently?" he asked. His voice precise and mechanical. "Any disturbances in the sky? Sounds, lights, movements that don't match conventional aircraft?" My mind raced. Was he asking about that night? I tried to sound casual. Yeah, maybe. I admitted I saw something over the mountains yesterday. The man writing in his notepad looked up after scribbling a few words. "Describe it," he said. My voice stayed steady even as my hands got sweaty. I told him what I'd witnessed. Fast, darting, silent, and vanishing into the sky. "Anyone else with you?" he asked. They wrote more notes, and then the first man leaned back. "Nothing else?" "No," I said. "That's it." Walking out of the office, something felt off. It wasn't pure fear, but a heavy sense that something was watching just beneath everyday life's surface. Strange days followed. People seemed normal, but I kept seeing dark-suited men. They'd appear at parking lot edges, near bus stops, or lingering behind the football field trees. Each time I looked directly at them, they'd disappear. Then the humming started. Late at night, while reading, I noticed a low, constant pulsing sound. It wasn't loud, but vibrated enough to lightly shake my windows. I wondered if it was the heater or a transformer. The next morning, Leah said she heard it too. Marcus hadn't noticed anything. I tried recording the sound on my phone. The audio was weird, a constant low thrum with a strange flickering, like the sound skipped every few seconds. Listening to the recording made my chest feel tight. A few nights later, an unexpected knock came. My parents were asleep, and I hadn't told anyone about the humming. I opened the door to find two bald men in black suits and sunglasses, despite the darkness. "Evening," one said in a neutral tone. I froze. "Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" the other asked. I was stunned. "Yeah, I guess." "How do you know?" They didn't respond but stepped closer, creating a pressure that made the room feel small. "Tell us everything," the first man said. "Times, duration, witnesses." I stammered through the details. The nights I'd recorded the hum, Leah hearing it, the fast light in the mountains. They listened silently, occasionally writing something down. I was sitting at the kitchen table late that night, a half-empty coffee cup beside me. Northern Wisconsin's dense pine woods surrounded my small, older house on the town's edge. Late July hung thick and warm, windows cracked open to let in some air. The week at the plant had been long, leaving me with a restless, unsettling feeling. That's when I first heard it. A faint sound like a distant engine idling, but something was different. A steady, low hum that seemed to breathe, swelling and shrinking with an almost living rhythm. My windows rattled lightly with each pulse. Pressing my hand against the glass, I felt the vibrations pass right through me. Outside on the back porch, I scanned the tree line. Nothing moved. The sound grew stronger. Curiosity pulled me to record it. Later, I played back the audio, noticing something strange. The last few seconds of each clip would go silent, with a slight warping, as if something invisible had brushed past the microphone. 2 men came. They took notes, their expressions neutral. "Keep this to yourself," the first man said. "Don't discuss it with anyone." Then they left, the door clicking shut behind them. A week later, the humming weakened. Soon after, it vanished completely. I saw the men again at the grocery store, dressed in black, wearing sunglasses, standing by the vegetables as if they belonged there. When I looked away and back, they had disappeared. School returned to normal. Friends joked about nothing, but I started noticing the mountains more. At dusk, I'd catch glimpses of something darting between the ridges, too fast for a plane, too precise for birds. I said nothing, just watched. Now, lying in bed at night, I think about those knocks, the questions, the notes they took. I wonder if they came for Laia or Marcus, or if I was their only target. I've heard nothing from them since, but sometimes, when the air is still and the mountains are dark against the sky, I hear it. That low hum, faint and pulsating like the world is holding its breath, and I know I'll hear it again, even if no one else ever does. Night was dead silent. No wildlife stirred. Not a deer, not even a raccoon. A strange hum hung in the air, directionless and unsettling. I grabbed my phone, thinking Kevin, who knows audio gear, might help me figure it out. I set the phone on the railing and recorded for about 3 minutes before it abruptly stopped. Complete silence followed. Replaying the recording immediately, I heard it. A faint but distinct pulsing vibration that had earlier shaken my windows. I listened repeatedly, trying to understand its origin. My first guess was underground construction or a transformer issue, but nothing nearby matched that sound. The next morning I asked Harold, my older neighbor, if he'd heard anything. He hadn't. He slept through the night. At work in the factory, no one mentioned anything unusual from overnight. Around 9 that evening, while washing dishes, someone knocked. It was late, so I hesitated before opening the door. 2 men stood there, tall, impeccably dressed in black suits, white shirts, and perfectly polished shoes. They looked like they'd stepped straight from a fashion magazine. No badges, no identification. Evening. We're checking with residents in the area. Have you had any audio disturbances lately? The phrasing struck me as odd. Not did you hear something strange, but audio disturbances. When I asked who they were, he responded that they were from the Federal Survey Group, documenting unusual occurrences. I cautiously mentioned the previous night's hum, careful not to reveal my recording. They nodded subtly, as if this was precisely what they expected. The second man remained silent, holding a notebook but writing nothing, just watching me intently. "Did you record it?" the first man asked suddenly. I froze. How did they know? I denied making any recording. They exchanged an unreadable glance. "If it happens again," the first man instructed, "please do not attempt to capture it. Just note the time." Then, without another word, they turned and walked away in perfect synchronization, vanishing into the pine shadows. No car waited for them. They simply disappeared. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house, every distant car sound made me tense. I kept checking the windows, expecting to see someone standing out there. The encounter had lasted maybe 3 minutes, but it left me completely unsettled. How could they have known about the recording? I hadn't told a soul. The next day, I tried to play the recording again. The file was gone. It was still listed on my phone, timestamp 2:03 a.m. But when I tapped it, the player said, "File cannot be opened." I tried connecting the phone to my laptop. Same thing. The file was there, but empty. I haven't heard the hum again, but those men haunt my thoughts. Sometimes late at night, I think I see 2 figures walking past the edge of the woods, moving slowly, silently. I never step outside to check. A week has passed since they came by. I keep replaying everything in my head. The hum, the way it seemed to exist everywhere at once. The recording that disappeared, the men who knew about it before I even mentioned it. I've gone back to work, tried to get back to normal, but there's this feeling that someone or something is watching. I close the windows at night now, even if it's hot. And sometimes when it's quiet, I swear I can feel the pulse of that hum again. Faint but real, vibrating just under the skin of the house. I don't talk about this with anyone. People think you're nuts when you bring up experiences like this, but I can't shake it. Every night I check the clock, then the windows, half expecting them to come back, or for the sound to start again, or for the file on my phone to reappear. I keep the phone on the counter at night now, just in case. And sometimes when the wind moves the pine needles in a certain way, I swear the air itself is humming, and I wonder if they're out there somewhere, waiting for it to start again. It's not frightening in a way that makes you scream, but it's there under the skin of everything, and it's not normal. I don't know why it happened, or who those men really... All I know is that, after that night, nothing has felt the same. I've tried to rationalize it, tried to tell myself it's just some weird electrical thing, some mental trick, maybe a passing truck with a subwoofer too close. But I can feel it, that vibration in the air, and I know what I heard. And I know who showed up the next evening, standing perfectly still. I was finishing my last round at the industrial park just after 3:30 a.m., pushing a mop through the main lobby. The fluorescent lights buzzed with an uneven rhythm, too old to shine steadily, and the HV's hum made the building feel alive, breathing. Early September nights carry a strange mix of late summer warmth and unexpected cold, sharp bites that slip through whenever a door opens. My headphones played an old country station, just loud enough to distract me from the overwhelming silence. This place is always quiet late at night, but that night felt different, empty, more unsettling. When I stepped out of the east side service door to grab the trash from the loading dock, I knew something was off. The parking lot looked the same as always, empty, quiet, but something felt wrong. Then I saw it. At first, I thought it was someone slipping from a car or hiding behind a truck. But this was something else entirely, a pale white figure that glowed faintly, moving across the lot without touching the ground. Not walking, exactly, but sliding, almost floating. I froze. The shape was human-like, but wrapped in light or fog. I squinted, thinking maybe the security lights were playing tricks. But every overhead light was steady, and this glow didn't match any of them. It passed behind a line of trailers and vanished. No sound, no gravel crunching, no car engine, nothing. I stood there, staring, waiting for it to reappear, but it didn't. My first instinct was to dismiss it as imagination, maybe a reflection on my glasses or a shadow trick. But my gut knew different, that cold, tight feeling that tells you something real just happened. Now I live with this memory. The blinds stay closed, doors locked. Every passing car makes me look, half expecting someone in a black suit to appear. And though I haven't heard that strange hum again, sometimes when the house settles, I feel a vibration beneath the floorboards. A pulse. A sound that shouldn't exist. I don't understand what happened. I can't explain it, but something did happen, and it left its mark. The morning was still dark when I went outside to lock the east doors around 5 a.m. That's when I first noticed the small car parked on the far side of the lot. No headlights, no running engine, and definitely not there when I arrived at 11 p.m. the night before. At first, I brushed it off. The parking lot's big enough that people sometimes park and sleep or just hang out. Maybe a coworker left their car overnight. Still, something felt off. As the sun started to rise around 6 a.m., casting pale light across the lot, I walked to my car and stopped cold. Two men stood right by my driver's side. They wore brand new black suits and pressed hats. Their faces were oddly pale, almost blank in the dawn light, and I didn't recognize them from anywhere around the park. Morning, one said, his voice unnervingly flat, like he was reading from a script. Were the security lights malfunctioning last night? I stammered. No. I don't think so. Everything looked fine. I kept my keys clutched tightly in my hand. The second man nodded slowly. Good. We just wanted to check. It's easy for things to go unnoticed when a building's empty. They stared at me, unmoving, not smiling, not fidgeting, just waiting. My throat went dry. You're the janitor? The first one asked. When the second added, nothing else unusual, I hesitated. I wanted to tell them about the glowing figure I'd seen earlier. Part of me wanted to run, but something about their unnatural calm made me feel that speaking up might cause more trouble. So I just shook my head. Good. Have a safe day, they said, walking away with an eerily smooth, synchronized movement. They disappeared behind a row of trailers. Sitting in my car, I couldn't stop thinking about the glowing figure. The lot had been empty. No cameras showed anything strange, yet I couldn't shake the image of its movement or how these two men appeared right as I was leaving. Later, I told my wife about it, but she didn't seem to take it seriously. I'd been working night shifts for 2 years, and nothing unusual ever happened. Most nights were quiet, maybe a raccoon knocking over a trash bin, or a trucker grabbing coffee before dawn. But that morning was different. I drove past the park later that afternoon. Everything looked normal. Lights worked. The lot was empty, But I couldn't shake the memory of those two men and their strange behavior. I tried convincing myself they were just contractors or security inspectors. Yet something felt off. Their timing, their questions, none of it seemed right. Too calm, too precise. A week later, I asked a coworker if anyone had been in the lot early that morning. He shook his head. No one unusual. You sure you weren't dreaming? He asked, but I knew what I saw. I started catching myself looking for them, driving past the park at night, checking the lot. Strange reflections appeared in windows. Shadows moved too smoothly. Once, I thought I saw a glowing figure on the tree line behind the trailers, but it vanished before I could get close. I hadn't seen the men again, and part of me wasn't sure I wanted to. Yet every time I passed that lot or heard the hum of old fluorescent lights, a cold, tight feeling returned. Most nights after my shift, I'd walk to my car thinking about the encounter. The figure, the men, their questions. What did they want to know about the lights? About me, about the lot. I kept telling myself I'd imagined it all. Maybe I had. But I knew those men were real enough to stand there at dawn like the world hadn't even noticed them. Now I drive past slower. Windows up, lights on. When I go inside at night, I park under street lamps. Sometimes, catching the right angle, I swear I can see that pale glow sliding across the lot. I remember that morning, how the world felt small, quiet, and somehow not entirely mine. I never mention it at work. But with every shift I finish, every quiet lot I leave, I feel the weight of their unseen gaze, even when I'm alone. The long, dark road stretched out before me, a monotonous path that seemed to drag on forever. My playlist hummed softly in the background, just loud enough to keep me alert. Gradually, even the music blended into the rhythmic sound of tires rolling over asphalt. That's when I noticed it. A star, or what I initially thought was a star, unnaturally bright and steady. It hung lower than stars typically would. It appeared to be tracking me. Through the windshield, I caught glimpses of this strange light, dismissing it as a plane, a reflection, or simply my tired eyes playing tricks after hours of driving. But the light remained. It followed me through every turn and straight stretch of highway, maintaining a constant distance just beyond the road's curve. I checked my mirrors, searching for a car with an extremely bright headlight, but found nothing. No vehicles, no lights, just that single white point moving alongside me. By mile marker 112, unease had settled in. My fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, and a cold sweat formed on my neck. My heartbeat felt thunderously loud. Echoing within the car's cab, the thought of pulling over crossed my mind, but I pushed it aside as irrational. When a rest stop appeared, I didn't hesitate. I slowed down, turned into the lot, and parked at its edge where overhead lights barely reached. The car fell silent except for the cooling engine's soft ticking. After turning off the radio, I sat back and surveyed the desert landscape. That's when I saw them. Two men seated on a bench near the payphone, dressed identically in black suits, ties, and fedoras. They seemed unremarkable at first glance, yet something felt distinctly off. They weren't conversing or engaging with anyone. Instead, they sat rigidly, staring ahead as if they'd been waiting specifically for me. Realizing I'd been staring too long, I noticed one of them subtly tilting his head, not in greeting but with the detached curiosity of a cat observing an unintentional movement. I attempted to laugh off my growing unease, attributing it to exhaustion or the desert's strange psychological effects. I stepped out to stretch, and the night was colder than expected. Stars dotted the sky, but one light caught my attention. It hovered directly above the parking lot, motionless, as if waiting. My feet moved slowly, almost against my will. One of the men on a nearby bench shifted his weight. The movement wasn't quite natural, smooth and deliberate, like he knew exactly how I was watching him. I muttered, "Evening," out of some instinctive social reflex. No response, not a twitch, not a nod. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things and walked back to my car. Glancing over my shoulder, both men remained perfectly still on the bench, watching. That strange light seemed to have moved closer, though I couldn't be certain. My pulse quickened. Inside the car, doors locked, I stared at the lot. The men hadn't moved. The light remained, now blindingly white like a spotlight. No wires, no reflection, no visible aircraft, just a pure, steady glow. I started the engine, pretending to scroll through my phone. I needed a plausible reason to leave. Maybe if I pulled out slowly, it would seem normal, just another routine stop. But when I finally pulled out, something made my breath catch. The bench was empty. No men. Not behind a bush, not near a car, not walking anywhere. They had simply vanished. I blinked, shook my head. Maybe they left when I started the car. Maybe it was nothing. Back on the highway, I stayed carefully in the center lane, scanning the mirrors. The light had disappeared too. Just empty desert stretched around me. My heart slowed, but tension lingered in my shoulders. Driving in silence, I couldn't shake the memories. That light had followed me for miles. Those two men, sitting like they knew exactly where I would stop, as if waiting. I tried to rationalize it. A late-night art project? Pranksters in suits? A distant plane? A mirage? Nothing made sense. Nothing fit. I was sitting on the couch in my Ohio duplex around 2 a.m., unable to sleep. The hot August night had me cracking open windows, hoping for some air movement. Suddenly, a strange sound caught my attention. At first, I thought it might be a distant truck or late-night machinery, but something felt different. The noise was a low, steady hum with an unusual pulse, like a subtle bass beat you'd feel at a concert, except quieter and more physical. My windows actually rattled with each rhythmic swell. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, with no clear source. I walked to the kitchen window and looked out. The street was dead quiet. No cars, no people. Curious and slightly unnerved, I grabbed my phone and started recording. I planned to send the clip to my friend Kevin, who works with sound, hoping he might identify it. For about 2 minutes, I let the recording run. Then, as abruptly as it began, the hum stopped. Complete silence. Not even crickets. I immediately replayed the recording. The low vibration was faint but distinct, with that strange rhythmic quality. I must have listened a dozen times, trying to make sense of it. Underground work? A power issue? Nothing felt quite right. Uneasy, I went to bed. The next morning I checked with my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Someone, Patel. She hadn't heard a thing. Years later, I still think about that night. Sometimes on long drives, I catch myself glancing in the mirrors, half expecting to see something unexplained. I never stop at that rest area anymore, and occasionally, in the darkest moments, I think I glimpse a shadow on the roadside, something perfectly still watching. I was home again that evening around 9 o'clock, halfway through a sandwich, when someone knocked at the door. Unexpected visitors always make me uneasy. When I opened it, 2 men stood there, both tall, dressed in nearly identical black suits with white shirts and black ties. No badges, no clipboards. They looked almost like characters from an old photograph standing on my porch. "Good evening," one of them spoke immediately. "We're checking with residents in the area. Have you had any audio disturbances lately?" The phrasing caught me off guard. Not a simple, "Did you hear a noise?" but audio disturbances. I asked who they were with. The first man offered a quick smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're with a federal survey group. Just need to confirm if you've noticed anything unusual." I hesitated. Something made me hold back about the recording. I mentioned hearing a low humming sound the night before. Both men nodded slightly, as if this was exactly what they'd anticipated. The second man, who hadn't spoken, pulled out a small notepad but didn't write anything, just held it. "Did you record it?" the first man asked. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't mentioned recording anything. Playing dumb, I said I'd just noticed the sound for a couple minutes. They exchanged a quick look. "If it happens again, please do not attempt to capture it. Just make a note of the time," he said. Then, as casually as they'd arrived, they stepped back, thanked me for my cooperation, and walked down the driveway. There was no car out front when I'd opened the door. By the time I leaned out to check, they were already halfway down the street, walking side by side in silence. I locked the door immediately. The entire encounter lasted less than 3 minutes, but it left me deeply unsettled. How did they know about the recording? Nobody else knew, not even Kevin. I hadn't sent him the clip. That night, I sat in darkness, phone in hand, waiting for the hum to return. It didn't. But with every passing car and every house creak, I felt watched. Like someone was standing just outside, listening. My job at the small garage outside Lincoln, Nebraska, sometimes means late nights. That night, I was wrapping up a transmission repair for a client who needed his truck by morning. By the time I finished cleaning up and locking the place, the streets were completely empty, with that heavy late summer humidity hanging in the air. My drive home follows county roads cutting through endless cornfields. It's the kind of route where you can go miles without seeing another vehicle. I had the windows cracked, radio playing softly, just trying to unwind after a long day. About 10 minutes into the drive, something caught my eye, a glow off to the right. Initially, I thought it might be farm equipment, but something felt off. It wasn't moving, and the color was strange, not the harsh yellow of headlights or red of tail lights. Instead, it was a soft, whitish-blue light, steady and spread out like what you'd see in a welding shop, but much wider. As I got closer, I realized the glow was coming from the middle of a cornfield. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder and stopped the truck. The field was maybe 50 yards away, and the corn rows were perfectly illuminated, each stalk casting sharp, distinct shadows. That's when I saw it, something that definitely wasn't a tractor. A flat disc about 30 feet across, just sitting between the rows. The light wasn't shining onto it. It was coming from the object itself. The entire surface seemed to glow faintly, as if the metal was internally lit. I sat in the truck, frozen, staring for what felt like an eternity. I wanted to get closer, but realized I'd left my phone charging back at the shop. Part of me wanted to drive away and pretend I'd seen nothing, but curiosity won out. Later, when I tried to record what happened, something strange occurred. The audio file appeared on my phone, time-stamped at 2:07 a.m., but when I tried to play it, only an error message showed up. Plugging the phone into my computer yielded the same result. The file existed but was empty, showing 0 seconds. I haven't heard that strange hum again since that night, but sometimes, when I'm up late, I'll catch myself looking out the window, thinking I see two figures standing just at the edge of the shadows across the street. I never go out to check. I was driving late at night when something caught my eye in the cornfield. A strange glow illuminated the rows, casting an unnatural light from underneath. I turned the truck around and headed back to the garage, but something pulled me to return. When I drove back to the same spot, the glow had vanished. As I rolled down the gravel shoulder, I noticed two men standing near the field's edge. They weren't typical farmers, no reflective vests, no caps, no equipment, just two men in black jackets and dark pants, standing perfectly still and facing the road. One raised his hand, signaling me to stop. Against my instincts, I lowered the window. The man who'd waved approached, close enough for me to see his pale, clean-shaven face. He was around mid-40s, and his expression remained unchanged as he spoke. "Fields closed tonight," spraying. I scanned the area. No machinery, no tanks, no engine sounds, just dark corn swaying in the night breeze. When I asked about the light I'd seen, he repeated the same flat statement about field spraying. The other man stood silently a few feet back, hands at his sides, staring. He seemed older, and like his companion, looked completely out of place. I nodded, muttered an apology, and drove away. In my rearview mirror, both men remained standing, watching me leave. At home, my mind raced. That initial glow seemed so bizarre, how it lit the corn from underneath. But the men troubled me even more. They'd appeared suddenly, as if waiting, and their explanation made no sense. Real farmers don't spray fields at midnight without equipment or lights. The next day, I drove the same road in daylight. The field looked completely normal. Intact rows, no tracks, no signs of burning or machinery. Everything seemed undisturbed at the spot where I'd witnessed that strange glow. I usually run at night after work around 10 or so. The park near my place in Northern Virginia has a decent trail that loops through some woods and back around a big open field, maybe 2 miles total. It's not lit, but I always bring a headlamp. Most nights it's empty except for the occasional dog walker. This was early October, one of those clear, cool nights where you can see every star. I'd left my phone in the car, which I almost never do, but I wanted a break from music. It was quiet except for my footsteps and the crickets. About halfway through my second lap, I slowed down when I hit the open field. I like to look up at the sky when I pass that part because it's the only stretch without trees. I stopped jogging, leaned over with my hands on my knees to catch my breath, and tilted my head back. That's when I noticed something strange. A patch of stars, maybe the size of my hand, shifted a little. At first, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks after running. But I stood there a while and I saw it again. The stars weren't twinkling like the rest. They were duller, almost faint, like they were behind a film of glass. And the whole patch moved, sliding a few inches to the left, then stopping dead still. I kept blinking, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe a cloud had drifted in, but there weren't any clouds. The rest of the sky was sharp and clear. I turned off my headlamp just to check. With the light gone, it was even more obvious. This section of sky wasn't lining up with the rest. It was like someone had taken a square cutout and was dragging it across the stars. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually I got uncomfortable. Not scared exactly, just this deep sense of wrongness, like I wasn't supposed to be looking at it. I switched the headlamp back on and forced myself to keep running. By the time I got home, I was still thinking about it. Now, sometimes when I drive home late, I'll slow down without realizing it, scanning for any strange light out there in the rows. And every time I do, I half expect to see something waiting. I thought I saw a faint ring in the dirt between the corn rows once, but maybe it was just where the irrigation had cut deeper. I didn't get out to check. I've passed that field plenty of times since then, and I've never seen anything like it again. The empty parking lot felt different when I returned after my run. 2 men were leaning against my car, looking completely out of place. Their appearance was too deliberate. Black jackets, black pants, dark shoes. Nothing like typical park visitors. No running gear, no water bottles, just standing there waiting. As I approached, they remained motionless. The first man spoke, his tone unnervingly calm. "Enjoy the illusion," he said, those exact words. I stood there, still catching my breath, trying to understand. They weren't smiling or threatening, just blank and observant. The taller one studied me with an unsettling intensity. When I asked what they meant, they offered no explanation. The first man simply repeated his cryptic statement. "Did you enjoy the illusion?" My hand instinctively brushed against my keys in my shorts pouch. They were blocking my car, and I needed to leave. The taller man slowly stepped aside, never breaking eye contact. The other remained by the driver's door. I unlocked the car, startling myself with the flash of headlights and beep. As I slid into the driver's seat, one of them leaned down to my window. Dark glasses obscured his eyes, even in the night. "Best not to look up too long," he said. Then, in perfect synchronization, they turned and walked straight into the dark woods, not toward a car or street, but directly into the trees. I sat idling, watching the trailhead, half expecting them to reappear. They didn't. My hands trembled on the steering wheel during the entire drive home. The next morning, I returned to the parking lot. Families walked dogs, children rode bikes. Everything seemed completely normal, with no trace of the previous night's strange encounter. I was out fishing from Booth Bay Harbor on a late September morning. The weather was mild enough to go solar without freezing, but a thick fog blanketed the water. I'd taken my small 20-feet lobster boat a few miles beyond the usual spots, not running traps but dropping nets to see what I could catch before the season slowed down. Everything felt muted that morning. The engine noise, gulls, and waves slapping against the hull were all dampened by the fog. Around 8, I pulled in my first net, finding mostly junk and seaweed, along with a couple of undersized cod that went back into the water. The second hole was different. The net came up heavy and uneven. Initially, I thought I'd snagged some rocks or an old lobster trap, but when I dragged it over the side, a strange metallic object was tangled in the mesh. It wasn't large, roughly basketball-sized, but more of a lopsided oval with peculiar seams. The surface looked like brushed steel with scorched spots. When I knocked on it, it felt hollow and lighter than expected. I figured it might be airplane debris or a broken buoy. As I leaned over, trying to spot any markings, another engine sound caught my attention. Boat traffic wasn't unusual that early, but this sound grew rapidly. Through the fog, a sleek black motorboat with no visible name or registration slid closer. 2 men in black jackets and caps stood aboard. One shouted, "You pulled something that doesn't belong to you," which made me laugh nervously, though they weren't joking. They pulled up alongside me, close enough to reveal their clothing looked almost like uniforms, but without patches or insignia. Both wore sunglasses, absurd in the thick fog. The man at the wheel stated firmly, "That's military property." Their demeanor was serious, leaving no room for argument. I still run to that field sometimes, but never without my phone now, and always avoiding looking at the sky as much as possible when I pass by. I was out on my usual fishing run, fog thick as cotton around me, when I pulled something strange from my nets. Before I could even get a good look, 2 men showed up out of nowhere. They were calm, almost too calm, and kept repeating the same line. "It's military debris. We'll be taking it." Something felt off from the start. I asked to see their identification, but they just stared at me, silent and unmoving. When the second man stepped forward with a gloved hand, expecting me to hand over the object, I pushed back. I told them I'd call the Coast Guard to verify everything. Their demeanor shifted instantly. The man at the wheel leaned in and said flatly, "You didn't see this, understand?" Before I could respond, the other guy was already on my deck. Moving with an unsettling precision, he unwrapped the metal object from my net like he knew exactly what it was, then carried it back to their boat, setting it down almost tenderly. I was angry. but stayed quiet. Their practiced movements made my stomach twist. They disappeared into the fog as quickly as they'd arrived, leaving me surrounded by grey silence. Something didn't add up. Why would military personnel show up without any official markings? Their boat had no lights, a serious violation in these conditions. And how did they find me so quickly, with no other boats or helicopters in sight? My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I finished hauling my nets, constantly scanning the mist. Back at the harbour around noon, I wanted to tell someone about the encounter, but the words caught in my throat. How could I describe two strangers in a black boat taking an unknown object without sounding completely crazy? That night, the encounter kept replaying in my mind. Their cold efficiency, the way they knew exactly where I'd be, the mysterious object, nothing felt right. And I couldn't shake the feeling that this was about much more than some lost military equipment. I spend most nights on the road, and this particular stretch was quiet, even for a trucker. I was hauling pallets west on I-80, somewhere past Ottawa, the early May air still crisp. Around 3 a.m., with nothing but highway and occasional headlight streaks for company, I noticed something odd ahead. At first glance, I thought it was construction lighting. A steady glow hung low over the road, maybe 50 feet above the asphalt. As I slowed down, leaning closer to the windshield, I realized this wasn't any standard roadwork setup. The shape was distinctly triangular, with 3 white points marking its corners and a faint luminescence connecting them. Weeks earlier, something else had been tracking me. It started with a dark sedan rolling slowly past my house, idling at the end of my lane with its lights off. The first couple times, I brushed it off as a lost tourist, but by the third night I was watching through closed blinds, seeing 2 shadowy figures sitting motionless in the car. I'd stopped taking my boat far from shore after that. Something about those moments in the fog felt wrong, like someone knew exactly what I was going to do before I did it. Even now, months later, I'll catch a glimpse of a car in my rearview mirror that seemed to follow just a bit too long before turning away. Back on that highway, the triangular shape hung there, unlike any aircraft I'd ever seen. Sharp, precise, waiting, just like those men in the sedan had waited outside my house. Some things you can't explain, but you know they're watching. My rig's headlights caught something hovering dead still over the road. No sound, no movement. The underside looked metallic, smooth as polished stone. My heart raced as I eased into the left lane. Just me underneath this strange triangle hanging motionless above the asphalt. When I passed beneath it, the CB radio suddenly erupted with crackling static loud enough to make me jump. Dashboard lights flickered wildly. I pushed through, checking my mirrors. The triangle remained suspended, growing smaller with each passing second until it vanished completely. I finished my run, rolled into the service yard around 5 and stayed silent about the encounter. The next night found me at a truck stop outside Joliet, following my usual routine. Late, near 2 in the morning, the diner was mostly empty. A tired waitress moved between a few scattered drivers, while overhead lights hummed softly. I slid into a booth, ordered coffee and eggs, and spread out my logbook. That's when I noticed them. 2 men sat perfectly still across from me, about 12 feet away. Black suits, plain and crisp, white shirts buttoned to the neck, no ties. They sat rigid, hands folded, precisely on the table. Not businessmen, not quite right for this hour. No food, no drinks, just watching. Not staring overtly, but angled just enough that I knew their eyes were locked on me. Every time I looked up, they hadn't moved. No conversation, no motion, complete stillness. When the waitress brought my coffee refill, I leaned in casually. "Those guys been here long?" I asked quietly. She glanced over, then back at me, confusion clear on her face. "Who?" I pointed to the booth. 2 men in suits. She shrugged, giving me a look that suggested I was joking. "Haven't seen anyone like that tonight," she said. I nodded, stirred my coffee, and kept my head down. The night shift dragged on like always, quiet and uneventful at the distribution warehouse. 15 loading bays stretched across the sprawling property, with a small office block and about 3 acres of fenced lot. My job was simple: watch the monitors, log truck arrivals, and do occasional walk-rounds. Most nights, nothing happened. This night was clear and cold, with wind occasionally gusting but not enough to trigger the motion sensors. I was nursing a cup of stale coffee when something caught my eye on camera 12, which covered the far corner of the southern yard. The area was dimly lit by perimeter lights, and at first I thought the screen was glitching, but then I leaned closer. A shape sat low behind the far fence line near the trees. Not a truck, not anything I recognized. It wasn't casting shadows like it should. Instead, the thing glowed with a soft, pulsing whitish light that didn't resemble any spotlight or headlight I'd ever seen. Later, driving through the night, my nerves were on edge. Every set of headlights behind me made me tense. Earlier at the diner, two men had sat silently in a booth, their presence somehow unsettling. I'd finished my meal quickly, walked past them, they never looked up, and stepped into the cool night air. When I reached my truck, I noticed something strange. The diner booth was suddenly empty. No chime of the door, no footsteps, no car pulling out. They were just gone. Back in the cab, I locked the doors and sat staring across the fuel island. My logbook sat on the passenger seat, and bizarrely, the page I'd been writing on was blank, a fresh sheet with no notes, though I knew I'd written half a page while eating. The next morning at a rest area, I checked the logbook again. The page remained untouched, as clean as if I'd never written a thing. Now I avoid fueling at that stop. And when I see a triangle of lights in the sky, even far off, I keep my eyes firmly on the road. I stared at the monitor, frozen. Something glowed on camera 12, solid and unmoving. I'd checked cameras 13 and 14, but they were blocked by storage containers. My impulse was to snap a photo with my phone, but something held me back. I watched, transfixed, for maybe half a minute. Then the glow shifted, tilted, or rotated, with absolutely no accompanying sound. Even from a distance, any truck or machine would have made noise. In less than a blink, it vanished, completely. No fade, no movement. Just gone. The empty yard still held my gaze when the front gate camera suddenly showed activity. An unmarked van with no readable plates pulled up to the security office. Two men emerged at 2 a.m. dressed identically in black suits, white shirts, and black ties. They didn't look like typical truck drivers or inspectors. The taller man had an unnervingly narrow face and skin so pale it appeared grey under the security lights. His companion kept his head down, studying the ground. Neither cracked a smile. When I buzzed the intercom and asked if I could help them, the tall one looked directly into the camera and spoke in a completely flat tone. "We need access to the southern loading bay." That request stopped me cold. The southern loading bay wasn't on any public map, an old, unused section hidden behind newer expansions. It was kept locked, with no scheduled deliveries. As far as I knew, only management and security knew this area existed. I hesitated to respond. The tall man repeated his request verbatim. When I asked who they were with, the shorter man glanced at his companion and simply said, "Time-sensitive matter." Every instinct screamed not to let them in. They stood unnaturally still, not shifting or looking around. I said I'd need to call my supervisor. The tall man claimed they'd already spoken to him, which I knew was impossible. Dennis, our on-call supervisor, lived 2 towns away and would have informed me about any visitors. Something was very wrong. My night shift was dragging on, quiet and uneventful, until 2 men appeared at the security door. The shorter one stepped right up to the glass, and something about him made me pause. His eyes were different, not reflecting light like they should. I've seen plenty of people come through here, and these eyes were just dark and flat. I told them I couldn't let them in without clearance and reached for the phone. Before I could make the call, they were already walking back to their van. No arguments, no threats, just turning away like it meant nothing. The van pulled off without headlights, rolling smoothly down the access road until the darkness swallowed it completely. I switched to the road cameras, but they never appeared. Strange, since the road only has 2 turns before hitting the highway. Back on camera 12, the yard was empty, silent and dark. Every little sound of the building made me jump for the rest of my shift. No more vans. No more strange shapes lurking behind the fence. When Dennis arrived at 6 to take over, I described the incident. He looked at me like I was joking. According to him, no visitors were logged and no one had called. We checked the gate camera feed. The recording for that time slot was gone. A corrupted file, the system claimed. Every other camera was fine, except camera 12, which went black for about 4 minutes right after I saw the initial glow. After that, I kept quiet, didn't tell anyone else about what happened. But even now, when I'm out in the lot at night, I find myself looking toward that far corner, half expecting to see that pale light pulsing in the darkness. I've been flying small aircraft for over 10 years, mostly charter flights and occasional sightseeing trips. This particular afternoon was typical, a short flight from Billings to a private strip near Sheridan. The sky was cold and clear, with a thin layer of high clouds. The light had that washed-out silvery winter look when the sun can't quite break through. About 30 minutes from landing, I saw something unusual. At first, I thought it was just a break in the clouds catching sunlight differently, but it moved quickly. A metallic disc dropped vertically from the cloud layer, perfectly straight, no tilting or wobbling. It stopped midair, hung there for maybe 2 seconds, then shot off horizontally and vanished into the mountain haze. No sound, no contrail, nothing. It happened so fast I barely had time to process what I'd seen. The airstrip felt eerily quiet as I taxied toward the hangar. 2 men stood just inside the building's shadow, wearing identical black suits with white shirts and dark ties. No coats, despite the freezing 25-degree temperature. One tall and thin, the other shorter and broader, both pale as if sunlight was a stranger to them. They didn't move as I shut down the engine and climbed out. The taller one approached first, speaking in a flat, almost mechanical voice. "Mr. Tesla, Harlan," he said. I nodded, wondering how they knew my name. "We'd like a moment of your time," the shorter man added, holding a clipboard with several papers attached. My instruments had been perfectly normal during the flight, but something about the approach had felt off. A weird plane from an unusual angle, lacking wings, too smooth and clean. "We understand you observed an aerial anomaly," the shorter man stated. I froze. I hadn't reported anything. I hadn't even fully understood what I'd seen. "I saw something," I replied carefully. "Not sure what. That's why we're here," the taller one responded. "Standard procedure for atmospheric interference reports in controlled airspace." He handed me a pen and flipped the clipboard toward me. Dense text covered the form, but the words "atmospheric interference" and "no threat to flight safety" caught my eye. They wanted me to sign, confirming whatever I'd seen was a known atmospheric effect. No mention of aircraft, no mention of anything unidentified. "Who are you with?" I asked. "Federal jurisdiction," the shorter man said, as if that explained everything. "Federal jurisdiction," he repeated. The wind picked up, rattling the hangar doors. I noticed the airstrip was completely deserted. No ground crew, no fuel truck driver, just these 2 pale men and me. "I don't feel comfortable signing something I don't understand," I said. "You did see atmospheric interference," the taller one stated. "Not a question, but a declaration with an inexplicable weight." "I saw a metallic object," I said slowly. The shorter man stepped closer. I landed at a small airstrip, quiet and empty. Something felt strange from the moment I arrived. 2 men approached me, their movements synchronized, almost rehearsed. The taller one held out a clipboard, his eyes catching my attention. There were flecks in his irises, but they looked uniform, almost grey. "It was atmospheric interference," he said, as if correcting an unspoken statement about something I'd seen. I glanced toward the terminal building, its windows dark. Not a single sound of an engine or human voice broke the silence since my arrival. Without really thinking, I signed the form when the clipboard was extended again. The shorter man snatched the paper immediately after my pen lifted, tucking it under his arm. They stepped back in unison, a slight nod from the taller man, and then disappeared into the shadowed part of the hangar. When I followed moments later, the hangar was empty. No doors, no hiding spots, no trace of where they could have gone. A plane starting up in the distance suddenly made everything feel normal again. My usual ground crew appeared, asking about fuel, and when I mentioned the 2 men, he looked confused, claiming no one had been around all day. I didn't argue. I paid for fuel and left. Later, I discovered my flight log was missing, the notepad gone, though my pen remained clipped where it always was. Those men were never seen again. My name is Lena Ortiz, and I'm a photographer with a passion for capturing lightning. Storm chasing is my specialty, a pursuit driven by the raw energy that slices through dark skies. This particular evening was different. The air hung heavy and still, humidity pressing down just before a thunderstorm would break over the power lines outside the city. I'd set up near a familiar dirt road where electrical pylons stretched across an open field, but something felt off. The silence was unnatural. No crickets, no wind, just a thick, oppressive quiet that made the hair on my neck stand up. I watched the clouds, waiting, sensing something was about to change. The storm had been brewing, and I was ready with my camera, waiting for the perfect lightning strike. When a sharp bolt suddenly illuminated the sky, I captured the moment. As I lowered the camera to review the shot, something unusual caught my eye. Between 2 powerline pylons, a dark, perfectly round shape flickered, momentarily like a shadow slipping between the metal towers. I blinked, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Maybe it was a trick of light, a bird, or a drone. Zooming in on the photograph, I confirmed what I'd glimpsed. There it was, a round shape hovering near the power lines, clearly visible where the lightning had momentarily revealed it. Though my heart raced, I attempted to dismiss it as a weather balloon or a camera artifact. Days later, I found myself in a quiet downtown cafe, editing photos on my laptop. The place was nearly empty. Suddenly, a man in a plain black suit approached and sat down across from me without warning. "I see you've been photographing the storm near the pylons," he said with an unsettling calmness. Confused and slightly unnerved, I nodded. Before I could react, he grabbed my laptop and pulled up the photograph. Unexpectedly, he printed a black and white copy using a small portable printer from his briefcase. Sliding the print toward me, he spoke cryptically. "If you decide to share this image, consider framing it differently." His thin smile lingered for a moment before he abruptly stood and walked away. Stunned, I examined the print. In black and white, the disc-shaped silhouette was even more pronounced, a mysterious detail that continued to puzzle me. The lightning storm had been intense that night. I was out with my camera hoping to capture something remarkable when I noticed subtle distortions in the air around me. It seemed to shimmer and bend in ways that didn't make sense. Strange things started happening after that. My phone began acting up, calls would drop randomly, and my GPS would show me in locations I'd never been. I caught glimpses of people watching me, men in black clothing who blended seamlessly into crowds. They never approached, but their presence was unsettling. I returned to photograph the storm another night, determined to understand what I'd seen. As the wind picked up and lightning crackled across the sky, I set up my camera. For a brief moment, I thought I saw the disk again, flickering near some electrical pylons. But when I raised my camera, it vanished. The next morning, an unmarked envelope lay under my door. Inside was a Polaroid taken from outside my apartment window. The image was grainy, but I could clearly see my reflection, and behind me, a faint shadow of a man in a suit. No note accompanied the photograph. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I stopped sharing storm photos and deleted every image from my devices. The sensation of being watched grew stronger. Weeks passed, and while the men in black didn't directly confront me, I could feel their eyes on me whenever I stepped outside. The strange occurrences continued. I kept photographing storms, always hoping to catch another glimpse of the mysterious disk, but it never reappeared. Some mysteries, I realized, are meant to remain hidden. It happened during my night shift at Brook Hill Medical. The time was precisely 3:10 a.m., a moment I remember clearly, because we always restocked crash carts at 3 a.m. That night had been unusually quiet, with no new patients since midnight. Sitting at the nurse's station in ICU 3 and catching up on charting, I noticed something odd. The hallway lights near room 314, leading to the fire exit, flickered briefly. Not all the lights, just that specific row. A quick buzz, then back to normal. In an old building like this, with the ICU on the 5th floor, such electrical surges from the HVAC weren't uncommon. The lights started flickering, a slow dimming that seemed to last longer than before. A faint clicking sound, similar to the hum beneath the transformer, caught my attention. Walking toward the fire exit to check for a faulty bulb, I passed room 314. The double doors blinds were open, revealing Mr. Stutty's NTs. Right, Garza, a long-term patient who was intubated and sedated. Despite being unconscious, he was moving, one hand raised toward the ceiling, eyes still shut. The monitors showed nothing unusual. I watched as his hand slowly fell back to the bed. Then, through the window, I noticed movement on the small rooftop area beyond the unit. It's a restricted space, accessible only to maintenance, covered in gravel, vent hoods, and large metal HVAC units. A shape caught my eye, tall and narrow, standing motionless behind a vent stack. I thought it might be security doing rounds, but that seemed unlikely. As I stepped closer to the window, I could make out a shadowy figure backlit by city lights reflecting off the cloud cover. The posture was unnaturally stiff, head slightly tilted, arms hanging too straight, like a mannequin. Another hard flicker of the lights, and when they returned to full brightness, the shape had vanished. I radioed the front desk, asking if anyone was on the roof. They confirmed no one was there and reported that the access hatch remained locked from the inside. I chose not to report what I'd seen, dismissing it as a potential hallucination from too many night shifts. An unsettling feeling settled over me. That part of the unit felt noticeably colder, a detail other nurses have joked about, mentioning ghosts in the vents. Their laughter didn't resonate with me. As my shift ended and I headed to the break room to clock out, something caught my eye near the vending machines. I was walking near the elevator when I noticed him. A man in a pressed black suit, pale and neat, standing out like he didn't belong. No badge, no scrubs, not looking like any hospital staff I recognized. just standing there facing the elevators, holding a slim black folder. Something about him made my stomach drop. As I walked past, he stepped forward and said my full name directly. Not a question, just a statement. When he handed me the folder, I saw a single-page form printed on plain white paper. It described an anomalous rooftop event between 2:45 a.m. and 3:30 a.m. on April 11th. The document demanded I agree not to discuss any visual or auditory phenomena with hospital staff, patients, media, or law enforcement. A signature line waited, along with spaces for date and time. When I asked what this was about, he responded in an unnervingly flat tone. This is for the hospital's internal review. It will not go on your employment record. It is strongly advised that you cooperate. His words sounded like a script translated from another language. I noticed a strange symbol on his tie pin, a circle with a line through it. I refused to sign without a supervisor present. He stood motionless, holding the folder, not blinking. An elevator dinged, 2 people stepped out, and he suddenly turned and walked away toward the old records room. Later that afternoon, I showed the form to my supervisor. She looked puzzled, saying she knew nothing about internal reviews or rooftop incidents. All hospital forms go through admin, she explained. She took the folder, promising to follow up. The next night, she told me the folder was empty when she opened it again. I haven't seen the man since. But occasionally, when I take the supply elevator near the West Wing, I feel watched from behind the old roof access door. And those hallway lights, they still flicker, same time, same place. I was heading home after a long day of storm chasing, about an hour outside Amarillo. The sky had been electric all afternoon, thunderheads piling up, lightning tearing through clouds, that heavy scent of rain and ozone hanging in the air. My camera gear was packed tight in the truck, ready for action. Years of freelance storm photography have taught me this routine. It's not glamorous work. Cold nights and frozen fingers are part of the job. But when you capture something rare, it makes everything worthwhile. This day would prove different. While setting up near a dirt road off Highway 287, I was tracking a menacing cumulonimbus through my telephoto lens. The cloud had strange rippling edges, almost like water waves. Suddenly, something caught my eye, a small metallic shape darting through the storm cells. It wasn't a plane or bird, no trail, no sound, just a sleek, shiny object weaving effortlessly between cloud formations. I snapped multiple shots, adjusting focus and shutter speed. The object vanished as quickly as it appeared. Later, reviewing the negatives, I confirmed what I'd seen. A dark disk of polished metal, catching the last sunlight. That night I set up my basement dark room, just a red bulb and chemical trays. Working carefully, I developed the film. The images revealed the storm landscape, and there it was again, that metallic blur, twisting through the air in several frames. The house was silent. Only the kitchen faucet's steady drip broke the quiet. Then the basement door creaked open. No footsteps on the stairs. I turned around. A man in a black suit stood in the red glow, pale face, sharp features, unnervingly calm. He was serious, almost out of place in the room. The light caught his eyes in a way that revealed a faint reflection of the negatives in his pupils. "Can negatives lie?" he said, his voice low and steady. I blinked, taken aback. He moved closer, hands folded calmly but with purpose. Can a negative show something that isn't really there? Something that might never have existed? I shook my head, unsure how to respond. His gaze swept the room, landing on the contact sheets pinned to the wall. "You've captured something," he said. "Something people aren't meant to see." My stomach knotted. Who was this man? A smile crossed his face, but it never reached his eyes. "I'm someone who ensures certain images don't spread," he explained, his tone polite yet carrying an unmistakable edge of authority. I felt cornered but knew I couldn't let him take the film. "Why are you here? What do you want?" I asked, my voice tight. He extracted a small card from his pocket, plain white, with black text, unreadable in the dim red light. "We keep things quiet," he stated. "You won't be bothered if you destroy these negatives." My heart raced. I wanted to refuse, to demand explanations, but his calm certainty gave me pause. Just then, my phone buzzed upstairs. A message from Mike about breakfast. The man seemed to note my distraction. "Think it over," he said, and then quietly left, the basement door closing softly behind him. The images were real. I had proof, but so was his warning. Strange occurrences followed. My camera gear would shift when I was certain I'd left it untouched. Phone calls dropped or became static-filled in certain house areas. Late at night, soft footsteps circled outside the windows, yet nothing was ever there. Telling someone seemed impossible. A mysterious man demanding I erase evidence. It would sound crazy. Who would believe me? Then one night, I noticed something different. The metallic object in the negatives was gone, not faded or damaged, simply vanished. I'm Tom Keller, 37 years old, and I've been fascinated by trains for as long as I can remember. My home is a small town in upstate New York, nestled near abandoned industrial lines where rust consumes the rails and weeds push through the wooden ties. One early fall morning before dawn, I set out to explore a particular stretch of track running through woods near an old quarry. People had whispered about strange lights in the area, but I was mostly seeking quiet moments with my camera and the forgotten rails. The sky was still dark, with just a hint of soft blue-gray emerging on the eastern horizon. The air was crisp and damp, woods filled with the scent of wet leaves and moss. As I walked down the track, gravel crunching beneath my boots, silence surrounded me. Then, about 100 yards ahead, something caught my eye that didn't belong. Sitting directly on the tracks was a craft unlike anything I'd ever seen. It resembled a wingless airplane, but smaller, perhaps the size of a large car. Its surface gleamed faintly, smoother than brushed metal, with no visible rivets or seams. A matte grey tone allowed it to almost blend with the misty rails. No markings, no lights, just there. I froze, unsure what to think. Though I'm not easily unnerved, something felt fundamentally wrong. I slowly raised my camera, attempting to capture images through the fog. But later, when I reviewed the photos, the object was missing. Checking my camera's digital backup confirmed the same strange absence. It was as if the craft had never been captured at all. Now I keep the developed photos and the mysterious card left by a man I encountered that morning in a box under my bed. When storm clouds gather and the wind shifts just right, I find myself wondering about returning to chase such moments. Yet something about that night and the man's cryptic question keeps me from pulling out my long lens. Maybe negatives can lie, or perhaps some things are better left unseen. The tracks stretched out before me, and at their end sat something unlike anything I'd seen before. Sharp and angular, the craft seemed designed for sliding or hovering rather than rolling. No wings, no obvious doors, just an unusual shape that felt out of place. A distant engine hum broke my concentration. Turning toward the road, I expected to see maintenance workers or early morning commuters. Instead, a black sedan appeared, stopping at the tree line near the track entrance. The driver's side window rolled down, and a man emerged. Tall and composed, he wore an expensive charcoal suit without a tie. Dark hair slicked back, his face revealed nothing, a practiced blankness that suggested years of concealing emotion. Without introduction or question, he walked directly to me and spoke, "Tracks lead to places you don't belong." I blinked, uncertain I'd heard correctly. His gaze shifted between me and the craft, then down to the ground. "It's best you don't touch anything here." His tone was serious, brooking no argument. I explained I was just taking pictures, not seeking trouble. He nodded slowly, then returned to his sedan and drove away without another word. As he left, something strange happened. The craft began to fade, mist thickening around it until nothing remained, just empty rails and morning dew. I felt uneasy, but intensely curious. Over the next days, I repeatedly checked the spot, no trace of the craft or the suited man. When I shared the story, friends dismissed it. Probably a military exercise, they'd say. But nothing about the encounter felt standard military. No helicopters, no patrol cars, no warning signs. Stranger things followed. During walks near the tracks, I'd hear footsteps behind me, only to find nothing when I turned. Shadows would slip between trees, always just beyond clear view. My phone began malfunctioning, calls dropping when dialing certain numbers, photos near the tracks becoming inexplicably distorted. Something had changed, though I couldn't explain what or why. I was driving home from work that night, second shift at a packaging plant just outside of Greensburg, Indiana, not far off I-74. It was around 12:40 a.m., maybe a little later. Those roads were completely empty, which wasn't unusual. CR700E gets so quiet at night you can drive for miles without seeing another car. No street lights, just endless corn and soy fields with occasional mailboxes marking gravel driveways. Sipping the last of my gas station coffee, I noticed the radio acting strange. It wasn't static, just dropping out. 2 or 3 seconds of silence, then popping back mid-sentence. I tried switching stations, but they were all doing the same thing. And my headlights dimmed, not completely, but down to about half brightness for a few seconds before returning to normal. That's when I slowed down. About a quarter mile ahead, something hung in the air over a cut field. Not a plane, not moving, just suspended. An old half-clapped barn with a rusted roof stood nearby, one I'd passed hundreds of times before. Low, hanging. Later, similar strange experiences would follow. Headlights behind me on a dark road, matching my speed for miles. A black sedan that stopped when I stopped. The driver never moving, just staring ahead. Phone calls with nothing but silence. Sometimes a slow, steady breathing before a faint click ended the connection. I stopped answering those calls. The whole experience felt like a bad dream. Yet the photos I took that morning remained on my camera. Something kept me from returning to those tracks, echoing the words of a man who once said, "Maybe there are places you're not meant to go." And on quiet nights when fog rolls in thick, I could swear I hear a faint hum, something sliding over metal tracks that no longer exist. The night was silent and still when I first noticed it hovering above the field. From about 50 feet up, maybe less, the object appeared as a massive black shape blocking out the stars. No lights, no sound, just a dark void hanging in the sky. As I drew closer, the shape revealed itself, a huge triangular wedge with soft, rounded corners, stretching nearly across the entire field. It moved with an uncanny steadiness, drifting like a blimp, but smoother, more purposeful. 3 small, dull red lights marked its underside, positioned near each point, not blinking, just present like standby electronics. I pulled over and rolled down my window, expecting some kind of sound. But there was nothing. Absolute silence enveloped me. No crickets, no wind, not even the hum of my own engine. The air itself seemed suspended. For 2 or 3 minutes, I watched, completely transfixed. My phone never even crossed my mind. The object began to rise slowly, lifting straight up without tilting or rotating. Those red dots remained unchanged as it ascended, fading into the night sky until it vanished completely. I waited a moment, then continued home to my quiet cul-de-sac in the Westport subdivision. That night, I didn't share my experience with anyone. I ate some microwaved mac and cheese, showered, and went to bed around 2 a.m. Sleep didn't come easily, not from fear, but from an electric alertness that kept my mind racing. Morning brought an unexpected sight. Around 7:30, after feeding my dog and making coffee, I noticed a black sedan in the driveway. No license plates. Tinted windows. It looked like a government vehicle. 2 men in dark suits stood outside, one near the front step, the other by the car. When I cracked the door open and asked if they needed something, one of them offered a subtle, controlled smile. The encounter started when 2 men arrived at my house. One approached the porch and was polite, asking for just a few quick questions. He inquired if I'd been on County Road 700E the previous night, near the collapsed barn. I confirmed I'd been driving home from work. His gaze was intense but not threatening, more like he was carefully studying my reaction. When he asked if I'd seen anything unusual, I hesitated before mentioning some weird lights in the sky. The second man, standing by their car, called over with an unexpectedly genuine question. "Do you often imagine things at night?" His tone suggested he'd asked similar questions before and received serious responses. I firmly stated I was awake and driving, and I knew exactly what I saw. The officers seemed satisfied with my explanation. The one near me nodded, then looked past me into my front yard and asked about outdoor cameras. When I said no, he simply nodded again and thanked me for my time. They left immediately, backing out of my driveway and driving directly out of the neighborhood without stopping anywhere else. Later that day, I noticed something strange. My mailbox had a peculiar smear, like oil or ash, which was present only on my box. I wiped it off with a paper towel, leaving a gray, greasy streak. After a moment's consideration, I threw the towel away. That night, my dog's behavior was odd. She refused to enter the backyard, whining at the door and backing away when I opened it. I ended up walking her out front instead. She kept watching the sky silently, not barking, just observing. A few weeks have passed since then. While I haven't seen anything else unusual, I now take a different route home from work every evening. The incident occurred on a Tuesday evening just past sunset in Red Rock Canyon. One of those twilight moments where the sky still holds some light, but shadows stretch long and dark and the temperature drops quickly. I was returning from a work trip in Vegas, taking the scenic route to clear my head. I've never enjoyed freeways if I can avoid them. The canyon stretched before me, the road narrow and winding between steep sandstone cliffs. At this hour, around 7:30, I was alone out here, just me and the empty road. A black sedan without plates caught my eye, parked just past a sharp bend. Not a typical sight in such a remote place. I slowed down, half expecting a roadblock or some construction work, but nothing seemed official. Two men in black suits and dark sunglasses approached my car. One tall, maybe in his early 40s, the other shorter and in his late 30s. They walked directly to my window, as if they'd been waiting. "Roads closed for maintenance," the tall one said without smiling. "You'll have to turn back." I looked up the road. No workers, no barriers, no equipment. Maintenance, I questioned. The shorter man cut in, private job. No exceptions. I was frustrated. I need to get through. I'm trying to get home. The tall guy was firm. "We can't let you through. It's not safe." The canyon around us was silent, empty. Just rocks and a fading sky. Their car was completely black. No visible windows, no license plates, no markings. Something felt wrong, but I tried to keep my voice calm. "How long is this maintenance?" I asked. "Indefinite," the shorter man replied. "Is there a detour?" "You have to turn around," came the tall one's response. I sighed and began backing up slowly, checking my rearview mirror. When I glanced back, both men were already in their car. As I shifted gears, I looked over my shoulder. The sedan was gone, no engine sound, no lights. Nothing, just empty road and canyon walls, no tire marks, no sign they'd ever been there. Confused, I stopped and gripped the steering wheel. Maybe they'd moved to block the road ahead. I crept forward, scanning carefully. No barriers, no equipment, nothing unusual. I pulled over at a wider spot and stepped out. The canyon was quiet, with only dry brush rustling in the wind. My phone showed no signal. I walked a bit up the road, trying to make sense of what had just happened. It happened 2 summers ago, during the Cascades. I knew this stretch of land well from past fieldwork. A remote area about 30 miles east of Lander, Wyoming, along County Road 221. Nothing but scrub hills and a lone broken windmill marked the landscape. The plan was simple. Park the truck off the shoulder, spread a blanket in the truck bed, and settle in with coffee and a camera to watch the meteor shower. The sky that night was pristine. No clouds, no moon, perfect clarity. But something felt off almost immediately. A black sedan appeared out of nowhere, 2 men inside who seemed intensely focused on something. Then suddenly, nothing. The car vanished. I searched the surrounding area, looking for tracks or any sign of what might have happened. Complete silence greeted me. Driving back, the darkening blue sky revealed the first stars. About 10 minutes into the return trip, a strange light caught my attention. Not like a plane or helicopter. It hovered just above the canyon rim, a soft, steady glow reminiscent of a lantern suspended in midair. Try as I might to ignore it, the light seemed to track me, always lingering at the edge of my vision. I stopped at the small diner near the canyon entrance. Only the night cook Sam was there. When I shared my story, expecting maybe a laugh, he simply nodded. "You're not the first to see things like this," he said. Lights, unexplained figures, roads that seemingly disappear. Sam spoke matter-of-factly about such occurrences. Back home, I checked news and road updates. Nothing unusual was reported, just standard warnings about rocky terrain. The encounter nagged at me. Over the next few days, I mentioned it to friends. Some joked about government agents or aliens, but I remained uncertain. A couple days later, a blank scrap of paper appeared under my windshield wiper. I folded it and left it on the dashboard, untouched. At night, I'd replay the events, the mysterious men, the vanishing road, that haunting light in the sky. The night sky was my companion, vast and silent. I'd arrived early, well before the meteor shower's peak, but that didn't bother me. Solitude has always been my comfort, especially out here, where cell service doesn't exist. Hours passed quietly. Around 12:30, I dozed off, waking just after 2 a.m. to a sky transformed by celestial light. I set up my camera on a basic tripod in the truck bed, capturing long exposures of the meteor shower. Something caught my eye past 3. The shape on the road behind me, not a shadow, not moving with me. A figure, about 50 feet back, standing motionless in the road's center. No flashlight, no movement, just a dark silhouette. I watched, puzzled. No car sounds, no footsteps, no typical human behavior. When I turned my headlamp toward the figure, the beam illuminated the road and surrounding brush, but didn't reveal a face. The figure didn't react, no flinching, no stepping back. One quick photo. The moment I clicked the shutter, the figure turned and walked into darkness, vanishing behind the road's low slope. I called out, considering checking if someone needed help, but decided against wandering into unknown terrain. Back in the truck, I examined the photo. A thin, unusually tall figure, possibly wearing black. The arms seemed too long, the head oddly shaped, almost featureless, like a blurred or turned-away face. I rationalized it as a camera glitch, though it unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. The rest of the night passed uneventfully. I watched more meteors and left just before dawn. The next morning, stopping for gas at a Conoco in Riverton around 7 a.m., the memory resurfaced. That's when things got truly strange. I pulled into a gas station, the early autumn air sharp and crisp, skies clear and darkening after sunset. The place was dead empty, just a lone cashier behind the counter. As I dried my hands in the bathroom, the door opened behind me. A man in a black suit stepped inside. Mid-40s, clean-cut, pale skin, top button fastened, no tie. His shoes were immaculate. He didn't look like he belonged there. Standing by the sinks, he said without looking at me, "You've seen too much light lately." I laughed, thinking it was a strange joke. Then he turned and looked straight at me. My stomach dropped. His eyes were wrong. The color seemed off. Irises too pale, pupils too large. "Not fake, just not right," he muttered. "Your phone," he said flatly, holding out his hand. No threat, just absolute certainty. "You took a picture. Give me the device." I didn't move. He stepped closer. Inexplicably, I pulled out my phone and handed it over. He unlocked it. I never told him. The code then walked out. I followed into the store, but he had vanished completely. No footsteps, no sound. The cashier kept flipping through a flyer, didn't even glance up. When I asked if he'd seen anyone, he said no one had come in. I checked the parking lot. No black car, no SUV, nothing, just me and my truck. 5 minutes passed as I tried to make sense of what happened. Then I realized my phone was back in my pocket. I hadn't felt him return it. Unlocking the screen, I found everything wiped. Camera roll, texts, downloads all gone, factory reset. Only my cloud-synced contacts remained. The photo I'd taken, completely erased. Even recovery software found nothing. The metadata showed a hard reset exactly at 7:14 a.m., the precise moment I was in that bathroom. I've rarely spoken about this. Those I've told assume I dreamed it. But I know what happened. That stretch of road, I've never gone back. I was down by the lake behind my house, sitting on the dock with my phone, trying to capture some star photos. The night was peaceful, as usual. While scrolling through my shots, something caught my eye. Right in the middle of the lake, just above the water's surface, a dark silhouette hung motionless. This wasn't like any bird or aircraft I'd seen before. No blinking lights, no sound, just a solid, sharp shape against the sky. At first, I thought it might be a trick of light or an unusual cloud formation, but when I zoomed in with my camera, I saw it was a smooth, matte black, oval-like object. For several minutes, it remained completely still. Then, without warning, it began drifting sideways slowly. Suddenly, it shot straight up and vanished into the darkness. I was left feeling uneasy but intensely curious. Days later, a strange sequence of events began. A black car from the early 2000s appeared at the end of my driveway. It was pristine. No dents, no license plate. What struck me as odd was the complete absence of tire tracks or footprints on the gravel. Each morning, the car remained in exactly the same spot. I started leaving notes on the windshield, but they went untouched. The vehicle sat there, silent and mysterious. I didn't mention this to anyone, knowing how unbelievable it would sound. One evening, while sitting on my porch after dinner, I heard gravel crunching. Looking up, I saw a man in a neat black suit standing near the driveway's end. His face was mostly shadowed by the streetlight. He simply stood watching me, saying nothing. The whole experience felt surreal, from the unexplained object over the lake to this unexpected visitor. Something was definitely not right, but I couldn't put my finger on what. I was out walking my dog, Benny, late one night in early February 2 winters ago. The night was cold but not snowy, with a dry sidewalk and me in just old sneakers and a hoodie. We live in a quiet Spokane Valley neighborhood, near Pines and 16th Nothing Special, just ranch-style houses and older trees with minimal nighttime traffic. We were heading back home about 5 houses away when Benny suddenly stopped and stared straight up. Initially, I thought he might be watching a bird or an owl, but then I saw it too. A massive black triangle hung in the sky, unlike any aircraft I'd seen before. I know jets and flying objects well, and this was different. Big, darker than the surrounding sky, with only 3 faint points of light. In the weeks that followed, strange occurrences began to pile up. A car started appearing every morning, though no one ever emerged. My phone would glitch when I tried photographing the nearby lake, showing strange static. Late at night, a faint humming would drift from the water, vanishing the moment I went outside to investigate. One night around 3 a.m., I witnessed soft blue lights flickering over the lake, pulsing slowly. I tried capturing them on my phone, but the screen went black, the camera freezing. When I looked up again, the lights had disappeared. Then came the encounter on my porch. A man approached and spoke in a low voice, saying something cryptic that would haunt me. The water remembers. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, melting into the darkness. Startled, I ran inside and locked the door. Though the man and his car vanished, something remained. When near the water, an unsettling sensation persists, a feeling of being watched, as if something lurks just beneath the surface. Those words echo repeatedly in my mind. The water remembers. The night I first saw it, everything went silent. It moved impossibly slow, this object with white corners gliding overhead without a sound. No engine noise, no wind disturbance, just pure, weightless motion. It passed maybe a couple 100 feet above me, and the world around me seemed to dim, like someone had turned down the volume knob. Even Benny, my dog, didn't make a sound. He just sat there, staring until the thing disappeared behind the northern trees. I tried to snap a photo on my phone, but the screen was frozen. It only started working again after the object was gone. I didn't mention it to anyone, figuring it was probably a military drone, or just one of those strange moments you eventually forget. But 2 days later, things got weird. One Tuesday night, I woke up suddenly, that inexplicable wide-awake feeling. Walking to check the thermostat, I noticed a black sedan across the street. It was an older model with chrome trim, idling in front of the Wilkins house. At exactly 3:17 a.m., the headlights flashed. A slow, short fade, on and off, like some kind of signal. Then it drove away smoothly, turning the corner and vanishing. I chalked it up to a strange dream, but the next night, same thing. 3:17 a.m. flash, then gone. And the next night, and the next. Always the same car, always one headlight flash, never parked in exactly the same spot, sometimes near the Wilkins, sometimes closer to the Morgans, but always directly across from my house. By the 5th night, I was getting nervous. I set up my phone on a tripod, recording from 3:10 for 20 minutes. When I checked the footage the next morning, something was off. I'd seen the car, but now it wasn't there, just an empty street. I stood watching, even waving once. No reaction. I started asking around the neighborhood. Nobody else had seen it, not the Morgans with their open blinds, not Mr. Stuffing, Harrington across the street, who claims his dog barks at the slightest movement. Even my wife didn't believe me. She works nights at the hospital and isn't around late. When I told her, she suggested I stop watching weird documentaries before bed. So I did. I changed Benny's walking schedule, moving it earlier to just after dinner. But I kept checking the window. Night after night, the car returned, always at 3:17. Always one flash. Always gone before I could reach the door. I called the non-emergency line once, reporting a suspicious vehicle. I gave them the time, make, and model, described the pattern. They said they'd send a cruiser. I'm not sure if they did. Nothing changed. About a week in, I decided to wait outside on the porch, lights hidden behind the column. Then he paced inside, uneasy about my absence. At 3:17, the car appeared again. No headlights this time, just faint running lights. It stopped across the street. Engine running, windows too dark to see inside. The car looked unnaturally clean. No front license plate. I stepped out slightly for a better view. The driver's side window rolled down halfway. A pale, thin-faced man in a black suit sat motionless, staring directly at me. We both remained completely still. After maybe 10 seconds, he raised his hand, not a wave, but a stop signal. Then he slowly rolled the window up and drove away without flashing lights. That was the last time I saw it. The following nights, I kept watch. Nothing came, just an empty street. I told myself I was relieved, but part of me missed its predictable appearance. At least then I knew where to look. Now I just check out of habit, always at 3:17. Sometimes I think I hear a car idling down the block, but when I look, there's nothing there. The late September air in northern Minnesota had a crisp edge, not quite settling into fall. Since dawn, I'd been walking the perimeter of this forest section, taking notes on the sparse activity around me. The clearing was hushed. with only the faint hum of cicadas and dry leaves rustling. Something felt different that morning. An unexplained shift hung in the atmosphere. Just as I was preparing to return to the research station, something caught my eye. A series of perfectly round scorch marks in the dirt. These marks formed a rough circle about 15 feet in diameter. Each was approximately 2 feet across, deeply embedded in the earth. The soil beneath was blackened and cracked, yet remarkably, no surrounding trees or plants showed any damage. No snapped branches, no burned leaves, just these clean, symmetrical marks, as if a giant hot cookie cutter had been pressed into the ground. I circled the area carefully, searching for any clues. No footprints, no tire tracks, no evidence of human activity or campfires, just the scorched earth. Methodically, I photographed the scene, made detailed sketches, and collected soil samples. After flagging the location on my GPS, I radioed the research station with a brief description. The team suggested possible explanations like a lightning strike or animal territorial marking, but the precise shape and symmetry defied logic. An unsettling silence enveloped the forest. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, constantly glancing over my shoulder, seeing nothing. Days later, an unexpected visitor arrived. A knock at the door of our old, modest research cabin broke the quiet. Opening it cautiously, I found a tall man in a plain black suit that seemed oddly out of place in the woods. No badge, no identification. His dark eyes were steady, his voice flat, yet calm. "I'm interested in patterns in non-human behavior," he said simply, without introduction or preamble. I blinked, trying to make sense of his sudden appearance. "My name's Claire, and I work in graphic design in Seattle. Sometimes the city just grinds me down, and I need to escape the noise and crowds." Late October brought one of those days when I decided to hike alone in the Cascades, somewhere between Snoqualmie and Stevens Pass. The day had that early fall feeling, the sun setting early, the air crisp but not quite cold, and the forest heavy with dampness from recent rains. I started hiking around noon, planning to cover 5 or 6 miles before turning back. The trail was mostly empty, with just an occasional runner or dog walker passing by. I was seeking solitude, a break from work and people. Later, back at my cabin, a strange man appeared without warning. He hadn't mentioned any agency or reason for being there. I showed him photos of scorch marks I'd found, and he examined them closely but barely reacted. Then he began asking incredibly detailed questions about my work, the animals I tracked, the data I collected, with an oddly specific focus that made me increasingly uneasy. His demeanor was unsettling. The way he moved, how his unblinking gaze seemed to analyze every word and reaction felt off. He knew exactly where the clearing was, though he hadn't asked for directions. When I offered to guide him there, partly to get him out of the cabin, and partly to see what he might reveal, he politely declined, saying he had his own methods. After almost an hour, he left without another word. I watched him walk away through the trees, his steps eerily silent on the soft forest floor. Once he was gone, I meticulously checked my equipment and locks. Nothing was missing, but an uncomfortable feeling remained. In the days that followed, the scorch marks haunted my thoughts. The clearing silence, the man's unnerving calm, his seemingly prescient knowledge, all of it lingered in my mind. I returned to the clearing repeatedly, searching for changes or unusual marks, but found nothing. Still, on certain nights, when the wind rustles the trees just right, I swear I hear a low, unfamiliar hum, not like any animal or machine, but a faint vibration beneath the forest's skin. I never saw the man again. No calls, no messages, just that single strange visit and the persistent sense that something out there was watching, though not particularly interested in me. About 3 miles into my hike, something caught my eye just off the path near some ferns. A black briefcase sat upright on the dirt, perfectly positioned as if someone had deliberately placed it there. No markings, no logos, just a plain matte black surface with scratches, suggesting it had been dragged or bumped around. Walking closer, I saw no one else nearby. The briefcase was locked tight, no visible combination lock or keyhole that I could detect. It resembled a hard-shell case for camera equipment or instruments, but firmly shut. I tried jiggling and shaking the handle, but it wouldn't open. Assuming someone might return for it, I left the briefcase and continued hiking. At first, the rest of the hike seemed normal, but gradually, something felt different. The forest grew heavy, the air thicker. Sounds became muted, bird chirps and leaf rustlings felt distant, like someone had turned down the world's volume. I wondered if my mind was playing tricks on me. Near the turnaround point, I glanced back, and the briefcase had vanished. I was certain it had been there moments before. No footprints, no crushed ferns, nothing indicated its presence or removal. Assuming fatigue was affecting my perception, I shrugged it off and headed back. The following days were strange. I constantly felt watched, but saw no one when I looked around. My phone battery drained unusually fast. Calls became staticky, and the screen would randomly flicker. These small oddities made me increasingly uneasy. A few days later, I returned to the trailhead to clear my head. As I walked the path, a man in a crisp black suit and tie caught my attention. Standing near the parking lot's edge, he had short, neatly combed dark hair, but his eyes were what truly unnerved me, not just tired, but completely hollow, like empty sockets with nothing behind them. I was out by myself on the edge of Devil's Ridge, a little spot I'd found while hiking near Flagstaff, Arizona. Late September had brought a dry, crisp evening that turned surprisingly cold once the sun dropped below the horizon. My mission was simple: capture the stars. The sky out there, far from city lights, was incredibly clear. I'd set up my camera gear, tripod, lenses and phone about an hour after sunset, just in time to catch the Milky Way emerging. The landscape was quiet, with only occasional wind whistling through scrub and pine needles. I was deep in concentration, adjusting aperture and checking exposure, focused on getting the perfect shot of the stunning, star-filled sky. That's when I noticed something unusual. On the ridge across the small valley, a figure stood completely motionless on a narrow rock outcrop, silhouetted against the starry backdrop, dressed entirely in black. It was like a statue. No movement, no discernible features, just a shape that seemed out of place. I assumed it was another late-night hiker or photographer, but something felt off. No footsteps, no voices had preceded this appearance. I called out softly, "Hey, you okay over there?" Silence. A second attempt, slightly louder, met the same response. The figure remained absolutely still. Then, without warning, the figure turned and walked away, footsteps quiet on the gravel. I watched, frozen, as the mysterious person disappeared. Later, I would find a briefcase in that exact spot, though on my next hike, it was gone without a trace. Now, strange things happen. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I catch a glimpse of someone just beyond my peripheral vision, always in a black suit with those same empty eyes. The briefcase haunts my thoughts. What was inside? Why was it there? Why did it vanish? I have no answers. Just an unsettling sense that something was watching, waiting, or attempting to communicate in a way I can't comprehend. Like someone had just flipped a switch, it vanished, not walking away or hiding, but simply gone. I blinked and looked again, but nothing remained. A little unease mixed with curiosity settled over me. I was completely alone in this remote spot, so I figured my eyes might be playing tricks. Maybe the darkness, the way light hit the ridge, or just my imagination. Trying to refocus on the stars, I noticed my hands were trembling slightly. Suddenly, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number, just a random string of digits. Something compelled me to answer. A distorted, cold voice cut through the silence with 3 chilling words: "We're watching." Then silence. My heart raced and the air felt impossibly cold. I couldn't decide whether to leave or stay and investigate. Rationally, I told myself it was a prank, but that voice didn't sound like a joke. Ultimately, I chose to drive home, taking a long route through winding desert roads. The radio crackled with static, and shadows seemed to dance around me. Multiple times I glimpsed headlights in my rearview mirror, only to find nothing when I looked directly. Exhausted and on edge, I finally made it home. A quick phone check revealed no missed calls, no texts, no unusual apps. Everything seemed normal. The next day, I returned to the ridge with friends. We searched thoroughly but found no footprints, no disturbances. The rocks and dirt looked untouched. That night, from my bedroom window, I caught a shadow slipping between trees across the street. I thought it might be a neighbor or an animal, but when I looked again, nothing was there. I've continued visiting Devil's Ridge, never seeing that figure again. Yet something always feels different. A quiet pressure lingers, like unseen eyes watching. Occasionally my phone lights up with unrecognized numbers. When I answer, only silence greets me. I can't explain what happened or who that figure was. All I know is that something strange exists out there in the darkness. A presence loomed overhead, silent and watchful. The vast darkness held more than emptiness. Something unseen tracked every movement, every breath. Night enveloped the landscape, but this was no ordinary stillness. Something was aware, something beyond human perception, studying the scene with an intensity that defied explanation. The stars glimmered in different witnesses to a moment charged with unspoken observation.